In October of 2016, the world got its first glimpse at a console that, in my eyes, would go on to be one of the most important consoles, not just for Nintendo, but for the entire gaming industry as a whole. Nintendo has always been a company focused on innovating gaming, but for a long time, in my opinion, since the N64, it's always felt like they've put limitations on both their home console offerings and also their portable console offerings, with neither side reaching the true greatness that they could have potentially reached. Key games always felt like they were stuck on one console or missing from another, almost as if each side was holding each other back. My favorite example is the Mario 3D games. On the DS, they were really cool games, utilizing the 3D hardware in really fun, creative ways. But then on the Wii U, don't get me wrong, I like 3D World, but it's just the same game, but on Wii U. It didn't feel like they took what the Wii U could do and actually implemented it into a Mario game. But the Nintendo Switch was Nintendo finally combining both sides of their gaming market into one system. A home console you can take on the go. A true hybrid console. Now, while the Switch wasn't the first handheld that could play console quality games on the go, or even the first hybrid console for that matter, technically the Sega Nomad did it first. In all honesty, the Switch was the first console that really showed that hybrid consoles are probably the future of the industry. I mean, why have one when you can have both? Nintendo's handheld market has always been insanely successful, especially because Japan favors the handheld gaming side of gaming compared to home consoles. And in the West, well, it's mainly a handheld thing for younger children. Children in the West usually get a handheld that they can play on, and they might get a single console, which normally is not a Nintendo console. But that is changing a bit recently. So combining both sides of their gaming market, the console and portable sides, into one single console is a very smart move, because the Switch became a console for everyone, both people that wanted a handheld console, people that wanted a dedicated console itself in the house, or people that wanted both. And to me, the Switch isn't just my favorite console of all time, for reasons I'll get into, but I honestly believe it's probably, if not one of, the best consoles we've ever received from any company. And yeah, I know that's going to attract a lot of attention, so before you flame me for that take, at least let me explain to you why I think the Switch is not only great, but also so important to me personally. The Switch has been with me for my entire adult life now. I mean, I got it in my second year of secondary school, and it has stuck with me through everything that comes with those years. The stress of not feeling good enough, feeling out of place, all those self-conscious thoughts, dealing whatever that weird emotion called love is, and yeah, feeling heartbreak for the first time. The Switch was a constant for me throughout all of those years. It's a console that's helped me to mature into, I guess, the man sitting here speaking to you today. Albeit a somber, miserable sounding one, but hey ho, I'm getting better. Now, I'm not going to talk about any pre-launch speculation for the Switch, which I know a lot of people do enjoy talking about, and I do as well, but I was not actually invested with the Switch news. Despite me owning a Wii U, yes, I'm one of them people, I didn't really look into gaming speculation and all that. The Switch was the console that got me into things like E3 and, well, until that ended, and things like Summer Games Fest. But before that, I wasn't really interested in watching all these presentations or the leaks and everything. So I'm going to go through each year, highlighting what a good console will always bring. Good exclusive games. So yes, each year I will be looking at games mainly. I won't be looking at things like updates to games and so on and so forth, because to me, they're not that important. I'm going to highlight the experiences I played each year and explain why to me they meant so much and how they made the Switch what it is now, both bad and good. By the way, spoilers for a couple of games, mainly Xenoblade, but also a couple other games which I'll have all here, which I might talk about a bit more. So just watch yourself, and if you're planning on playing any of these games, please play them or skip when I get to the years they released, because I will talk about certain games in a lot of detail. But this is not my review of any of those games. I might do videos for any of these games in the future. I'm not sure yet, but don't take this as like my final gospel. This is very much just sort of me, thoughts that came to me first, and I wrote them down. But, of course, our look back for the Switch's life should begin in one single spot. Our look back at the end, of course, guides us to the beginning, and that would be you never get a chance to make another first impression, and a first impression makes a lasting impression, and within the gaming industry, companies know this definitely. The launch period is the most important impression a game or console can make, as this impression will carry them further into their life cycle and will often determine if they will be a success or a failure. If you want examples of what a good first impression can do, the best examples I can point to are the 360 releasing a year before the PS3 at a significantly cheaper price point, and they had, why the fuck is he there? Or maybe having Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson talk about the original Xbox, or Sony revealing the PlayStation 1's price at a nice crisp $299. And if you want some examples of what bad first impressions can cause, well, the best ones that everyone always points to, the Xbox One's reveal with
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
The words of one man can lead to the downfall of a kingdom. Or maybe the Wii U with its absolutely confusing and convoluted presentation on what the Wii U actually was. Or my favorite, the PS3, with its price tag reveal. Yum. Nintendo knew this firsthand coming into 2017. They saw what a bad first impression can do to a console. I mean, they just had the Wii U, so they made for damn sure that they were ready to show off the Switch and ensure that people were not confused, which in their first presentation, they almost explained absolutely everything about the console itself, and they recently did this with the Switch 2 as well. They now kind of go overboard with it sometimes. And while they actually revealed the console in 2016, on January 12th, 2017, we had the Nintendo Switch presentation, which to this day is often called the best Switch showcase and one of the best video game showcases we've ever gotten. And why is that? Well, it did something that some presentations seem to forget to do. It showed off games that people actually cared about and explained a lot of stuff that people wanted to know. The presentation started by revealing the release date for the Switch, so if that's all you wanted to know, which some people that's all they care about, they would already know it. And also the price. They got the biggest question out of the way first, the reveal of its release date, March 3rd, and the price of it, $299, which compared to the price of the Xbox One and PS4 at the time was significantly cheaper. So it had a very low cost of entry, making it very appealing to most people. But of course, what is the point of a games console without games? So what did they show at this showcase? Well, after 15 minutes of tech talk, which is interesting to me, but probably not most of you, we got our first reveal at a new game that wasn't Zelda, one to Switch. The console's sort of technical showcase, which was a party game. While it's cool, I'll be honest, it's nothing too groundbreaking. You're not going to sell someone a console on this game. But then Nintendo got straight into the games that people actually probably cared about, with a reveal of a new IP, ARMS, a unique fighting game which still showed Nintendo was looking to be creative with their games. And despite ARMS not being a massive success, I still think the game is honestly really cool. Its idea of how it controls and everything is just so unique, and I would love to see them innovate more and improve on this kind of game in the future, especially if they make a second game, but I don't think that future will ever come. But then we were shown Splatoon 2, and man, they really weren't slowing down. This instantly tells me that Nintendo were focused on ensuring that not only good quality games were coming out, but a good spread and good variety of gaming experiences were being provided as well. They could have easily just shown off Zelda and maybe a Mario game and that be it, but they were ensuring that almost anyone could find something that they wanted to play if you weren't interested in single player experiences. Starting with multiplayer games is honestly a good way to get people interested if they're only playing it with friends, because some people, they don't play single player games. Also, having a sequel to Splatoon 1 which only came out a few years prior was kind of crazy to me how fast this game got made. And then Nintendo just went straight for the jugular with the reveal of probably the second most important game in the first year of the Switch's life, Super Mario Odyssey. I mean, what do you expect? The first true 3D Mario game in a good while, and it looked amazing. It looked creative, interesting, and seemed to have a focus on bringing as many fun different environments for players to explore. It just looked amazing, super if you will. Honestly, this could have been the final reveal of a normal Switch Direct or presentation, but no, this was just a middle reveal thrown in there just as a surprise. And to me, it showed that Nintendo were willing to go pretty hard with the first year of games. And then straight after Mario Odyssey, Monolith Soft revealed that their next game, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which, I'll be honest, this trailer is cool, but it doesn't really do a whole lot in actually showcasing what Xenoblade 2 is actually about. This is very much just revealing that, yeah, Xenoblade 2 is a thing. And again, it's nice to see that Nintendo is willing to publish less successful franchises with the Switch, which is apparent here. Xenoblade 1 was not super successful. Let's put that straight. Like, the community had to fight to get Xenoblade even published in English, and only Nintendo of Europe did that. Not even Nintendo of America did it, which explains why Xenoblade has a lot of British voice talent in it. And then after that, Fire Emblem Warriors came out of nowhere and was a very cool sort of collaboration. And then they revealed that 80 third-party games were in development for the Switch, with some key exclusives like the next Shin Megami Tensei game, which would become Shin Megami Tensei 5, and Octopath Traveler. While they're not exclusive anymore, at the time they were. And some other bits and bobs, like a new game from the No More Heroes dev, which would turn into a not very good game, and of course Skyrim again. The fact that even was 80 third-party games in development for the Switch was not only good for Nintendo, but also us, the consumer. Third-party support on the Wii U is no secret. It was terrible. Due to how poorly the Wii U sold, third parties basically all just pulled out. So the third parties showing their commitment again to the platform was promising to see, and meant that actually buying a Switch wasn't just for Nintendo games. Potentially you could play a lot more experiences on that game with what I've just shown off, things like Skyrim, for example, being ported to the Switch, which was promising to see. But now ending the presentation with Zelda's amazing date reveal trailer, revealing that yes, Breath of the Wild will indeed be the Switch's launch game, which is the best first impression you can make to show people why to buy your console. Just have a game there that people want to play. I don't think I can understate how good this presentation was in making the Switch seem like not only a good console for games, but also that Nintendo seemed like they wanted to create those masterpiece level games again that they used to make. During the Wii U period, it really felt like they were just biding their time and sort of just putting out the bare minimum. But now, the first game was a game that looked like it could be a Game of the Year contender that people were genuinely excited for. They were coming hard and fast in 2017, and with March 3rd only around the corner from this presentation, excitement was very, very high. So let's, I guess, start the actual Switch's life cycle, and I guess we should start about the first game I played on the Switch as well, which of course is its pretty much only first game that people really talk about. Breath of the Wild came at a really interesting point in my life. I know, shocker, but it came at a time when I started to lose the love I had for video games, as all I was playing was the yearly COD release, Counter-Strike, and occasionally a co-op game in GTA with my friends, but mostly COD and Counter-Strike. That's all I was playing, and it started to grate on me a bit. I wasn't enjoying gaming as much as I used to, and I really wanted to try something new out. And a few of my friends who did get the Switch, who had, let's say, more wealthy parents, and I was interested in it. I was interested in Zelda because I'd played a lot of Zelda games before and always enjoyed them. And I couldn't just go out and buy a Switch, by the way, because I was 14. But for my 15th birthday, I did get a Switch. And no, I didn't get a Switch at launch because I was 14 at the time and I had no money. But hey, I did pre-order a Switch 2, which is kind of funny, isn't it, how life changes like that? But let's get back to the game. And the one game that my parents got me with the Switch, of course, is Breath of the Wild. I've always been a fan of Zelda games, having played the Wii games and many of the DS and 3DS games, with Twilight Princess firmly being my reason for loving games so much. It is my favorite game of all time. And man, Breath of the Wild really blew me away. Breath of the Wild was a genuine evolution and next step in what open world games should be. I often see people not understand why Breath of the Wild is such a great game. I often hear people say it's boring and there's not a lot to do in the world, but they don't really engage the game in the right way. The best way I can describe Breath of the Wild is it's a game that is focused on what an open world game should be. It's focused on putting exploration first. So many open world games fall into the trap of relying too much on using their map and markers to guide you in their world. For example, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a great game, I love it, but it still has some problems with its map and how much it relies on using checkpoints and waypoints to guide you through the world and its missions. Or any Ubisoft open world which has the entire map covered in markers to show you where the content is, instead of having a natural way to show you where stuff is. And Breath of the Wild made sure to do this with intuitive map design and easy to understand communication to the player with things in the world. Things like fires and smoke coming up through the trees that you could see from a distance would guide you towards certain things like side quests. Or the shrines, for example, were very clearly marked out things that you could physically see, or the very tall towers you could see in the distance, which would allow you to make marks of your own. The game encouraged you to look around and really explore the area as best you could. That is what Breath of the Wild is. It is an exploration game at its core. You are constantly rewarded and encouraged to explore the world, diving into every nook and cranny you can find, and your own creativity is rewarded. I still remember so clearly using the underside of a ball puzzle which had a little maze on it, but I flipped it upside down and just used the flat side to beat a puzzle very quickly. It changed the way I looked and approached games going forward and what I valued in games themselves. And from that day, I am a lot more critical of what I play now. I often don't play a lot of the old games I used to play, things like COD or every yearly franchise I used to play, because I don't value what they give me anymore because I've played them before. I'm not saying that they're bad games, I'm just saying I don't dabble with them as much anymore. What I play now are games that I think can give me unique experiences or are genuine improvements over the last game. I know that's a loaded thought, but I'm not saying like the new Assassin's Creed, for example, is a bad game. I just think it's not enough of an evolution of what the Assassin's Creed formula is, or the new COD, or anything else. I still play sequels to a lot of games, and I'm not saying that I hate sequels. I'm not one of them people. I do enjoy quite a few sequels to games. For example, I'm very excited for the next Persona game, but that's because I believe these certain games do enough to improve from the previous games. But what I value a lot in games is often a significant improvement in either the story, gameplay, game design, or all of the above. I was just sick now of settling for a worse experience. I was often playing games like, I remember playing like Black Ops 3, wishing I could be playing Black Ops 2, which is a weird thing to think when you're playing a game. I should just be enjoying it, not wishing I could play another game. And yeah, Breath of the Wild really ate at my life with 400 hours of playtime and 3 complete playthroughs. And when I say complete, I mean complete. I was hooked. Breath of the Wild ate so much time away from me. And for me, it is firmly my second favorite game of all time. It's a game I compare not just open world games to, I compare all games to it in how they build their worlds and how they treat you as a player. And to think, honestly, only one game to me has surpassed its open world and how it uses an open world is insane to me. Of course, I'm talking about Elden Ring, as I still think RDR2 wasn't quite just there yet. It still has that old fluff in it. I still love RDR2. I have 400 hours in it as well, so please don't flame me. I do love RDR2. It just isn't as good as I would have liked it to be. But 2017, of course, had so many more great games. Mario Odyssey, a new amazing 3D open world Mario game. I love playing it, but it didn't scratch that itch that I had. That itch that Breath of the Wild awakened in me. Splatoon 2? Is Splatoon. It's great, but it's more Splatoon. And I'd stopped playing a lot of multiplayer games as well because I was getting bored of them. ARMS is really cool, unique game. Again, didn't scratch that itch. Fire Emblem Warriors, I like Warriors games, and the Fire Emblem IP is a great crossover for it, and I would recommend playing it, but again, it's nothing too insane. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is Mario Kart again. It's a Wii U port. A game I will say though, Snipperclips. That's a really cool and unique game that is fun to play for a weekend with a friend, or if you're lucky enough to have a partner. But I really wanted to find a game that made me feel something different and something that I hadn't played before. Breath of the Wild activated a hunger in me to hunt for games that made me feel real emotions, scratch that reptilian part of my brain, and made me sit there after beating the game, just staring at the credits, just speechless, in silence, just reflecting on what I experienced. I wanted to experience the cream of the crop, the pieces of cinema in gaming, and I was hunting high and low on Xbox, Steam, and on the Switch. And for a couple months, I didn't find anything, but there was one game I wanted to try. It was on my radar for a good while, so I guess I should tell the story of how I discovered it. Story time, I have a Wii U. I know, crazy, I've stated multiple times now, but I played a shit ton of Smash 4 on the Wii U. No, I'm not going to talk about Smash Bros yet, wait one more year. But a character in Smash Bros that always stuck out to me and I always found really interesting was Shulk. His design, his moves, his playstyle, his voice performance, especially by Adam Howden. I loved everything about him, and I knew I wanted to try out the series this character originated from, but I was worried about not enjoying it because it was a game in a franchise that I didn't understand and a genre I had very little experience in. I hadn't played many JRPGs before that, and this would have been my sort of real first dive into a JRPG. But the advice I give to anyone when they ask me for game suggestions or anything in gaming in general, I just state, just give them a chance. You can't judge a game before you play it. I heavily encourage you to always make your own opinions about games, either through your own research or through your own time playing it. It's okay to like games that other people don't like. It's okay to like the popular game. It's okay to hate on a popular game if you don't enjoy it. It's fine. I don't like very popular games. There are games that are bad that I really enjoyed, and you just have to accept that that's kind of what your opinion is. It's subjective, what you value in games. But I decided I wanted to actually give Xenoblade a chance, and for Christmas, I asked for the game, and I did receive the game, and man, Xenoblade fucking rules. Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I don't even know where to begin with this game, honestly. I hadn't played the first game of the series, as I didn't want to get my Wii out and buy a copy of the game because I wanted to play Switch, but I gave it a chance. And if you want to know, you can play 2 without playing 1, it's fine. Both of them are kind of like 2 of their own entry points, but if you're playing a certain other game, make sure you play them 2 first. But something that Xenoblade 2 did was it changed me in more ways than I actually think I realized. Even now, I still think about the game a lot and reflect on it a lot, and it makes me think a lot as well. I can't even imagine trying to explain what this game actually means to me, and I would love to do a video on the entire trilogy one day, but it's the best way I can simply sum it up is Xenoblade 2 was a game that moved me emotionally a lot, and it was the first game that ever did that. I've always been an emotional person. I wear my emotions on my face. If you see me in real life, you would know when I'm sad, angry, happy, whatever. And I'm sure anyone who actually knows me in real life watching this, there's very few of them, will know this as well. They will tell you that that's true. But Xenoblade 2 did change me in a way. It was the first game I cried at. Yeah, I'm pretty bad for this now, and man, I cried a lot at this game. This game made me feel every range of emotion that I didn't realize I could feel when I played a game. I cheered when I felt happy, I cried when I was sad, I felt dismay when the characters felt like they were going to lose, and I laughed my arse off at the jokes that they would pull, and I just felt content playing it. It was a weird sensation. There is one scene in this game that if I ever do a video on this that I would love to really go into, because it was the moment that it happened. It was the moment that I actually broke, and I just remember it so vividly. It just hit me in a certain way, and to this day it's still a scene I think about constantly, and even if I watch or if I were to replay the scene, I'm sure it would still make me cry to this day. And that's when I realized that not just games but stories in general can be as moving as Xenoblade 2. I've read books, watched films, TV shows, anime, played other games that have moved me the same way Xenoblade 2 did, but Xenoblade 2 is the first game that did that for me. And my love for this trilogy has changed me a lot in a way that I can't even explain. It's changed the way not only do I think, but also the way I approach life and look at it. Stories change people. They're as old as time and they always have done that. And video games are just another form of storytelling itself. Good story is art, as it moves you, makes you reflect on life, and sticks in your brain forever if it's good enough. And while Breath of the Wild awakened that hunger for me to find good games for gameplay reasons and how they build their worlds, Xenoblade 2 would awaken another hunger within me. A hunt to find stories that would move me, and it also made me realize that games are like art. But as much as I love Xenoblade 2 and would love to do a video on it and talk about it for hours, I have to admit now that it's not perfect. It's definitely not a game for everyone. It's definitely targeted at a more Japanese-centered audience, and it's very lucky I had a weeb side within me that I hid from everyone. And some people do have issues around its fan servicey elements, which, yes, they are there. I don't really care. I've never have really cared for stuff like that, and it doesn't bother me. I think it's because I'm just a bit different in that sense, because I don't look at it that way. But it never pulled me out, and designs at the end of the day also tell a story as well, and I think if you can't look past the very surface level thing, to me it tells me that you're never going to properly engage with something like that in the first place. And again, even the gameplay side of it, I know it's not perfect. The game is so front heavy on its tutorials that it will push you away if you don't push through it. You probably have to put about 4 hours into the game before you really start getting past a lot of the tutorials. You don't ever really get past the tutorials, but the first 4 hours is like every 5 minutes there's something you gotta read. But past that point, it's honestly, if you can get past all that, if you can open your brain to it and allow yourself to immerse yourself in one of the best worlds I've ever immersed myself in, you get to experience not only one of the best stories in video games, but meet some of the best written characters in games as well, and explore one of the most interesting worlds filled with lots of cool sights, locations, and creatures. Xenoblade 2 not only moved me from its story and characters alone, but it changed what I actually valued in games again. Story, which was something I didn't really care about before. Also, it formally introduced me properly into JRPGs, which became almost an addiction level love for a few years, which only recently I've pulled myself out of, mainly for YouTube, because of how long they take to play. And to me, these are the two most important games the first year the Switch had. I know people say Mario is more important than Xenoblade, but this is to me. As much as I enjoyed Mario, I never think back to it. Unless people ask about it, obviously, but these pair of games I think about at least once a week. So yeah, 2017 was kind of a goated year for the Switch, honestly. So where do you go from this? Having two games that completely changed the way I look at games and made me extremely excited for what the future held at Nintendo. Well, Nintendo weren't going to slow down, and in 2018, they were going to shake the gaming community up a bit. "2018, honestly, not a bad year for the Switch in general. There were some cool bits and bobs. Octopath Traveler, I haven't played it yet, unfortunately, sorry. Kirby Star Allies, a fun little Kirby adventure, but nothing too insane, but still really good. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, actually a goated platformer. Play it if you haven't, I know it's a Wii U port, but it's still amazing, and honestly, probably up there as one of the better platformers on the Switch. And there are a couple more Wii U ports as well, which I am not going to list because there's quite a few of them. But something that was cool was Labo. Remember that? That was something that Nintendo did a lot with the Switch. They experimented with different kinds of experiences. And despite Labo not being a super massive success and the next like Wii Sports, I still think it was really cool and a kind of interesting product in general. I honestly do hope, like ARMS, they take whatever they gain from this, be it what they could potentially do with the Switch in the future, and they revisit the idea and expand it in some way, shape, or form. Which it will probably be with like the VR sort of setup. I could definitely see them somehow turning the Switch 2 or whatever is after the Switch 2 into the ability to have it as a VR as well, or any other new peripherals that they could have made using the ideas that they implemented for use in Labo. But honestly, 2018 was about one game, the one game that I teased. Smash motherfucking Bros motherfucking Ultimate. This game consumed my life when it came out. I have over 2,000 hours on it. I know it's not as much as some people, but for me, it is one of my most played games of all time now. It is up there with Counter-Strike and some of the older CODs. That is a lot of time. Smash Ultimate is something that we'll never experience again. From the reveal of Everyone Is Here to all the DLC announcement hype, this game might just be a simple platform fighter, but the community that was built around it and everything made it so much more and something genuinely magical to be a part of. From the wild speculation over what new characters would be added, to how Steve from Minecraft made even my friends who didn't care about Nintendo stuff actually care about that game and talk about it. It showed me just how big gaming had truly gotten now. And while Smash Bros didn't emotionally move me the same way Xenoblade or Breath of the Wild did, it is still a very important game to me. It's a game I have kept coming back to throughout all the years since its release. Heartbreak, struggling with school, and even during the moments where I felt completely lost in life, and more recently with more health issues, it's always been there. Whenever I felt like I had nothing I could go to left, I could just boot up Smash Bros and just remember when life was simpler, when I felt like the happiest person in the world, when nothing could go wrong. Man, life changes faster. Even now writing this script, it's a game that I still pick up and play sometimes. When I've got nothing better to do and I'm laying in bed and I don't want to read or play another game, I'll just quickly pick up Smash Bros and play it. But it didn't just keep me sane. Smash Bros is also responsible for guiding me into many other games that I would go on to play. I'm a huge Persona fan. Huge. It is an understatement, that word. And yes, I found Persona through Smash Bros. But unlike most Persona fans, I've actually played the games. I've played 3 of them to be exact. Now, there are a bunch of other games as well that I've checked out purely because characters appeared in Smash Bros. And I don't think I would have gone out of my way to try probably any of those games if Smash Bros wasn't about. I probably would have never learned about them because I didn't really believe there was a lot of other stuff out there. Unfortunately, games often don't advertise themselves very well in general, especially slightly more niche stuff, especially here in the UK. Smash Ultimate basically became my gaming checklist. If I liked characters' design or how they played or their voice performance, I was looking up their game and I was going to play it. And God, the DLC character reveals were amazing. I remember almost exactly where I was for almost every single reveal and just how crazy it was when Banjo was revealed and how insane that was to see a Microsoft IP finally return to where he should have been with Nintendo, or when Byleth was revealed and how everyone lost their minds in a bad way for that because it was another Fire Emblem character, or when Steve was announced and how that broke the internet, or how happy I was when Pyro Mithra finally got added, when Sephiroth just appeared out of nowhere and was an amazing addition, and how poetic it was when Sora ended up being the final character added to what most likely will be the last Smash Bros. We get for a very long time. Sora really closed the book on what felt like a magical, once-in-a-lifetime gaming experience made by someone that genuinely cared. It showed to me that Nintendo doesn't just make good games. They let their creatives completely flourish and make the best versions of what they want their games to be. Smash Ultimate, to me, is a perfect example of that. I'm sure certain characters were a pain in the ass to get the rights to. I can't imagine how much of a pain Konami was to get Snake and Castlevania in the game, but they somehow did it. They probably fought tooth and nail for it, and they still did that. Of course, there were characters I wish got added, but I'm happy with where Smash Bros. Ended, and I'm happy, honestly, that it ended with Sora. There is no other character I think I would have picked over Sora, and I honestly didn't think we would have gotten him, but hey, it seems that if Sakurai's involved, anything's possible. Well, what else came out in 2018? Well, if it isn't the DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and yes, I did play it, and yes, I really enjoyed it. While Torna isn't as impactful or as important as the main game itself and the other games in the series, it's still a really fun adventure with a fresh twist on the Xenoblade gameplay in 2, and some incredible fucking music as well. Genuinely, some of my favorite music is in this game. I don't have anything super deep to say about this game. It's just good. It just is. If you like Xenoblade 2, you'll love Torna. Simple as that. And it does have some really powerful moments and really good character writing. It's a shame to me that often Torna gets labeled as skippable and you can just watch the cutscenes online, because it actually outlines a lot of important stuff to understand the main antagonist's motivations in Xenoblade 2. It's a game I don't think you should skip out on, and if you like Xenoblade 2, I don't see why you wouldn't want to play Torna. And to me, it showed that in the end, everyone in Xenoblade 2 was fighting for the exact same thing. It just depends how you mentally reached that point and who was guiding you in that fight. I wholeheartedly recommend playing Torna, genuinely. It's probably the most underrated part of the Xenoblade franchise, in my opinion. It's a great story, and even though it's not essential to the understanding of the overall narrative that was outlined in the 3 games, I still think it's well worth the price of admission and the time you put into it. It is a great game that I think is overlooked a lot. And yeah, the first Pokemon games also released in 2018, and they were Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. And wouldn't you know it, I'm a massive Pokemon fan, like actually unhealthy levels Pokemon fan. I played Pokemon games since I was 3 years old. Are these games good? They're okay. They're a 6 out of 10. There's nothing super wrong with them. They're very simple. They're very much baby's first Pokemon game, but they're nothing bad. They're nothing super horrible, and I actually enjoyed playing them quite a bit, and I did quite a bit of shiny hunting in these games. And I'm sure that no Pokemon game that comes out next will somehow taint my opinion of the Pokemon franchise within the next year.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is?
Pokemon fucking sucked. Now, as I stated, I'm a huge Pokemon fan, so that means 2 things. 1, I love it, and 2, I also hate it. Now, Pokemon Sword and Shield was, I was excited for it, as at first, the many rumors stated that a Pokemon game was going to be set within my home country, the UK, which was exciting. I was excited to see how they would build up the world of the UK in Pokemon, and how the whole region would look, and how they would represent what my culture is. And I was thinking mainly back to the many non-Japanese based Pokemon games like Pokemon Black, Pokemon X and Y, and Pokemon Sun and Moon, despite me not enjoying them games, but I always thought they did a good job at representing the culture within them countries, with very visually different looking regions and Pokemon that I always thought did a very good job at representing what them cultures were actually like. And this being the first true new generation Pokemon game and mainline Pokemon game on the Switch, I was excited to see what Game Freak could do with actual good hardware. And then it got revealed, and it looked okay, but then more got shown off. And more, and it got worse. and worse and worse. And then the developers just started making claims that were false about things like high quality animations and the whole thing of the Pokedex, not all of them being in the game. And the game came out and I didn't really like it. Sword and Shield for me is really like just It's not a 5 out of 10, it's probably a 4 out of 10, I'll be honest. Visually, it's ugly. I hate its story. It's boring. The game's pace is terrible. I hate the way it flows the entire game as well. The game just doesn't feel like a real adventure, and you don't feel like you're really doing anything because there is problems with how the game presents itself, and there doesn't really ever feel like a challenge within the game. I know people always state this, that Pokemon's becoming too easy, and people say, oh, they've always been for kids, but there's always been roadblocks in Pokemon games, mainly the rival battles, which have always been challenging. Trust me, I've played all generations of Pokemon now, and each generation from 1 gets easier slowly but surely. Yes, some games have very hard fights within them, but since Generation 5, it has been a cakewalk. There has never been any true challenge within a Pokemon game that I can really think of, other than maybe Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, but that doesn't really count because that was one single boss Pokemon. But the entirety of Sword and Shield was just a cakewalk. I can't remember the last time in a Pokemon game that I have lost a battle. It is really that bad. I understand that people say, oh, you have to put these restrictions on yourself. I should just be able to play the games straight, and I should still struggle if I'm not paying attention. I understand that they're made for kids, but that doesn't mean that kids need the easiest experience in the world. I played all these games like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl when I was 3, and I beat it. There's no way that you can make these any easier unless you're making it for literal fetuses. However, despite all that, I did enjoy my time with the game despite knowing it's not a good game. Despite its issues, the new Pokemon designs were good and they were cool, the online battling wasn't too bad, the DLC was decent enough for the price, and the music was amazing. And also, the post-game was good enough for what it was, and actually gave a good, nice, chunky bit of content at the end. It was very, very conflicting for me, and I didn't really know what to think of it. There were things I liked about it, but then there were things I fucking hated about it. So for me, it was just a very conflicting Pokemon game. I didn't hate it. Like, I didn't despise the game. I didn't think it was the worst Pokemon game. I still think the previous generation took the cake for that, and I know some people don't believe that. Sun and Moon to me is not the worst Pokemon game now. It was for a long time, and Generation 8 was not as bad as 7 to me for other reasons like hand-holding and just how easy the game was. To me, the game just felt like it needed way more time in the oven and way more time in the conceptual phase of how to build up its world and pacing and things like that. It really didn't help that Game Freak just have not been making good games in a long time. They feel like some sort of creative mind has just vanished from the team, and the people making the games now have no fucking clue what made the old games so special, which is really odd to say because a lot of the people still at Game Freak made the old Pokemon games, so it's just like this fucking whole terrible thing about rushing development and how Pokemon's this big franchise and they need the games to come out on time, so they can't get too big with this. It's this thing where the Pokemon franchise just does not want to slow down, and unfortunately that means the games get worse. You cannot make a better product in less time, unless you do what some games get, lightning in a bottle moments. Things like when Resident Evil 4 was made really fast, or Smash Melee was made in under a year. They're very rare and far between, and occasionally you see it with other games. But the Pokemon franchise, it's very clear Game Freak does not have the capability to do that, considering how bad they are at optimizing what is the only fucking game they work on, Pokemon. And to explain my excitement for Sword and Shield, when the Pokemon Center in London opened up, I went there. I went and waited in line for God knows how many hours. Thank you, Mother, for sitting there with us. And I played the demo there as well. And was it worth it? No, it wasn't. But I got a cool mug out of it, though. So there's that. But despite my indifference to Pokemon, it was okay. Do I think Sword and Shield is the worst Pokemon game? No. Do I think it's a good Pokemon game? No. It's just that's it. That's all I can say. But other than that, despite the letdown of what Pokemon Sword and Shield was, 2019 was actually a decent year. Luigi's Mansion 3 was a fun little game despite it not being anything earth-shattering. Super Mario Maker 2 was good, but definitely not as impactful as the first game, and it felt harder to do levels because of how the Switch was set up and not really designed how the Wii U gamepad was designed to be used. Astral Chain, which was a cool IP from Platinum, and I still need to play that, and it was a game I was actually excited for, I just haven't played it yet. Ring Fit, the spiritual successor to Wii Fit, and honestly, I think Ring Fit was a great game. Nintendo should honestly, I believe, make another Ring Fit because it actually was a smart way to make a fitness game without relying too much on what Wii Fit did with the balance board, which there's problems with Wii Fit. It's not an actual good workout sort of system. Ring Fit actually did what Wii Fit couldn't do, which was making the actual workout bit of the whole game more fun. Wii Fit has two things. You have like the party game ones that everyone remembers, which don't give you any sort of workout, and then the actual workout ones, which were really boring. But Ring Fit actually made the working out part really fun in a way, and actually made a good way to get a decent workout without having to do a lot of the sort of boring parts of Wii Fit. It actually felt like a game, that's all I'll say. Link's Awakening as well, that was remade, and I played it when I went on holiday somewhere. I can't remember where I went on holiday, it was somewhere in the UK, but I remember playing that and I really enjoyed it. I hope Nintendo remake a couple more 2D Zelda games because they're honestly really fun. Yoshi, I didn't play it, just did not look like something I would enjoy. But do you know what I did think I would like and came out in 2019, which was very surprising? Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3. Now, I love the first two Ultimate Alliance games. Fun fact, I'm also a massive comic book fan. I have stated that before in a video, but I'll state it again. Marvel, to me, has always been my bread and butter with comics. They've always been the thing I've read, always been the thing I've watched, always been the thing I've played. And that love for Marvel started with Ultimate Alliance 1 when I was but 3 years old playing it on the Wii. This was even before the MCU had started. I loved it, and it obviously got me really into Marvel and everything, and I started reading more comics, watching the TV shows and everything, and then of course when the MCU started, I started going to the cinema to watch them films. And it was okay, honestly. I liked it. I do think it's a decent game. Is it as good as the very first Ultimate Alliance? No. I think gameplay wise it's a bit better, but like as an experience for a Marvel thing, no. It's fun, though it only lasts about a week at most if you do everything. I just wish there was more replay value for the actual game itself, because the first Ultimate Alliance had insane replay value, insane replay value with a load of different secrets to discover in the game. This game though, it was very simple, and the DLCs, while good, were a bit disappointing at times. I did play it a lot though, and I mean a lot for some reason, but other than that, it was nothing really insane, but it is worth, in my opinion, if you really like Marvel. It's a fun game to play, and it's a great little adventure to go through, although it wasn't anything ground shaking to me. If only there was another JRPG that hit me in a deep emotional way with fun combat and a deep political story that would enthrall me for hours.
Colored glass in this beloved place.
Yeah, Fire Emblem Three Houses is really good, and I mean really, really good. And yes, it was the other JRPG that Smash Bros introduced me to and what I was interested in. Three Houses was a game I got insanely invested into. I spent a lot of time actually playing this game, and strangely enough, I really enjoyed the very simple character interactions and dialogue that you would have with the many characters within Fire Emblem. And it's really odd to me, considering how hard in real life I find it is talking to new people and listening to them. Being introverted is very hard and mentally draining sometimes. But not only that, I did really enjoy meeting and seeing all these characters and experiencing their stories, and the insane amounts of replay value that Fire Emblem Three Houses has is understated. If you don't know, Three Houses has 3 main routes, a big choice at the beginning of the game which decides which route you follow. These basically people say you have to play the game 3 times to go through each route. They are completely different. The second half of the game changes completely, your reasons for fighting change, and the character interactions change a lot as well. But within them 3 routes, you then have a couple smaller sub-routes that you can sort of divert off of and go towards different endings and change things up if you disagree with certain characters. And it's honestly insane how many routes and how many endings are in this game. And this meant that I played the game 4 times through, which, if you don't know, Fire Emblem games are pretty long. So playing it 4 times, I have about 500 to 600 hours in this game. It is one of my most played games on the Switch, and it's only behind things like Xenoblade and things like the Zelda games and Smash Bros and Mario Kart, and I did it all in like a year and a half, them 4 runs of this game, which insane to me. I would love to play it again, but it is a massive time commitment, this game. And while I love the story, I think it's an amazing story and really enjoyable to go through, it's definitely not as emotionally impactful as other games, especially something like Xenoblade 2, which I stated. It is really good and I really enjoyed it, and I still think about the game's story a lot and its characters, but the problem with it is, again, it's a Fire Emblem game, meaning the protagonist is silent. Most Fire Emblem games have a silent protagonist you play as, meaning there isn't as many super emotional, impactful moments, because you are meant to be involved as the character, and the developers don't really do these big emotional moments for a character that you're meant to be playing as. There are them in this game. There are some really good moments in my opinion. I just sometimes wish the character was voiced and actually was a character, and they did change that in the next game a bit. I just wish there was more sort of impactful moments, but again, it's a great story and it does have some great moments as well. But another issue I always felt was these impactful moments in the story often go sort of half-baked in a weird way. Because you pick a certain route, which is your house, which decides which characters you sort of meet and interact with initially, it kind of limits the potential that other characters have to really sort of develop and you get to know a lot. Basically, Three Houses has three main characters who are the three heads of each house, and depending on which house you pick, that character becomes sort of the main character as well for your run, and the other characters kind of become sort of antagonistic sort of characters. And there is honestly one character specifically, which I'm sure a lot of people who've played this game know, the Dimitri, is insanely well written. But unfortunately, if you don't pick his route, you don't get any of that development, and when you see the ending of his story in another route, it doesn't feel as impactful as it should be, which is really hard to explain, but I think if you play the game, you'll very quickly realize what I mean. It almost feels like having the three routes, while a sick and amazing thing for replay value, often feels like it's difficult to get the full story unless you play all three routes, which is hard to sell someone on when this is their first Fire Emblem game, saying that, nah, you need to play it 3 times. Is it good? Yes. Do I recommend it as your first Fire Emblem game though? No. Three Houses is a Fire Emblem game for Fire Emblem fans or people who really want to dig into its story. If you want a good Fire Emblem game, I'd recommend either going back a bit to Fire Emblem Awakening, which I think is probably the best Fire Emblem game as a whole to just present to a new person to the series. Of course, there is another Fire Emblem game on Switch, but I think that has issues which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's sort of my problem with Three Houses overall, is just that you need to do them 3 playthroughs. Most people don't even finish games they start. That is a fact. So the fact that you need to play this game 3 times to really understand its story is a bit of a hard pill to swallow. But despite that, I love it. It's a 10 out of 10 game to me. It's amazing. I recommend you play it. Go buy it now and play the fucking game. Do it now. Oh boy, the great waiting room year. The year where we were all locked inside. And fun fact about me, this was my final year of secondary school. And it was when I was meant to do my actual exams. So I didn't do them because in the UK, they all got cancelled. Whoopee, and yes, it's very fun. And this year I played a hell of a lot of games, which is pretty obvious because of lockdown, and there are quite a lot of them on the Switch as well. And I'll be honest, during them great virtual lessons that we still had to do, even though our exams were cancelled, I was always playing the fucking Switch. And a game I played a lot during lessons was Animal Crossing New Horizons. Yes, every YouTuber's favorite game to pull music from and put in the background. Honestly, it was just really nice to have a game that was just relaxing to just sit down and play when I wasn't meant to be playing games. And I'll be honest, I'm not a massive Animal Crossing fan. I'm not going to pretend and say I've had a long history of the franchise or anything. This was my first Animal Crossing game, and I really enjoyed it, which was kind of odd because it's not a game that I would normally enjoy. For example, I don't play a lot of games akin to it. Like, I've never played like Stardew Valley, for example, but I really did enjoy it. As to me, Animal Crossing did something really good because it makes you feel like you can accomplish a lot in a little amount of time. Normally with Animal Crossing, you boot it up, you play for 30 minutes, you put it back down, because there's not actually a lot to actually do in the game, but you do that every day, and it does feel like you actually get a lot done in a day. But also, it had one of my favorite things in it, a fishing minigame. I love fishing minigames because my favorite game of all time has one of my favorite fishing minigames in it. So I love fishing minigames, and also the bugs and fossils were always fun to hunt for to complete the museum because I am a collectible fiend. I love collectibles. I love hunting them and I love searching for them in games. There's a reason I beat Breath of the Wild 3 times in a row, collecting everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. But not only that, we also got Clubhouse Games, which I know doesn't seem like a crazy thing, but I actually played it a lot because it's actually a pretty decent party game, and also I really like card games as well. I'm a big card game player. So this was a fun game to have on the Switch because it meant I could just bring it with me if I ever went out anywhere, and I could always play it with people, which was really nice to have. But this was also a special year. It was the 35th anniversary of the first Mario Bros. And Nintendo graced us with the bare minimum, the 3D Mario All-Stars, which was divided when it first came out, from people calling it lazy, saying it should have included X game. Yeah, it probably should have included Mario Galaxy 2. Or they might have said, I can't believe how lazy and poorly done this thing is because it's just 3 ports or 3 emulators on a cartridge. Honestly, this was more than I expected Nintendo to do. The fact that they even released a physical edition of this game was more than I thought they would have done. I honestly believe they would just put the 3 games out on the eShop and said, yep, there you go, done. But they did give us a nice physical cartridge, so yes, you can buy a physical copy of the game, and yes, I own a physical copy of the game, and it's a great little cartridge. It's a cool piece of history, and and something that I will always be able to play now, even though they are terrible emulated pieces of shit and I would rather play the original versions of them games. It's still nice to have them physically on Switch, so they will always be available despite the increased price tag as of this recording, which will only get higher and higher as the years go by. Now, the games themselves, Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy, do I like them? Yes, they're like some of the greatest games of all time. Of course they're good. They're like me saying ice cream is good. Of course it's fucking good. So yeah, play them. They're good games if you've never played Mario games before, but why are you watching this video if you've never played Mario games? It would have been nice if these were natively running on the Switch, I will say that, and I would have loved it if they actually remade and remastered the games, like increased the native resolution, for example on Sunshine. I really wish they did some more with Sunshine. Honestly, I would have loved to see all of that, but again, at least we got them. Like, they could have just not given us anything. Like, you look at Pokemon, we never get anything for Pokemon. At least Nintendo do give us some bits for Mario, which is nice to see. And to be honest, the limited run of it as well was kind of annoying, but it kind of makes sense. It was for the 35th anniversary, so if they were still printing it after the 35th anniversary, it kind of feels weird, but it just was sort of a special game for true fans of Nintendo that they could get. And as I've stated, there is a lot of copies out there. It sold really well. I think it sold 10 million copies, so you can easily find a copy of this. If there was less than 1 million copies, then yeah, this thing would easily be 100 to 200 minimum price now, but a pretty decent amount of copies out there. So don't worry if you haven't got the game now and feel like you need to get it now. Its price won't increase super fast like some other games have. It will be pretty stable, but it will be a gentle climb. So don't worry, it's out there if you really do want to collect it physically, like if you're into that. But yeah, I'd recommend getting it now rather than later because the price will never go down. But yeah, some other stuff as well was Pikmin 3 Deluxe. I haven't played a single Pikmin game. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, another Hyrule Warriors game, and it was kind of cool because they marketed it as a prequel to Breath of the Wild, but then they changed their mind. So I don't know. It is cool. It's a fun game. It actually is really fun. The change to the story was kind of odd to me. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX. It's Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. We like it. It's a good game. Honestly, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is one of them Pokemon spin-offs that is just really good. So yeah, recommendation from me. Brain Training as well. That came back. And Brain Training is always a fun little time to piss about with and play about with. And yeah, it's good fun. And new Paper Mario the Origami King. I haven't played it yet. I need to play it though. But man, if only there was another JR. Well, here we go again. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Definitive Edition. Fun fact, I got really giddy when this was announced because about a week before the announcement in the Direct, I was planning on buying a copy for the Wii because I really wanted to play the first game. And yeah, my dreams got answered. Basically, that's all I wanted was the port of this game, and they gave us a remaster, which was so nice to see. So what did I think of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 when I played it? Man, Xenoblade is really good, isn't it? Xenoblade 1 also did push me emotionally. I did cry at it. So yep, let's bring up the scoreboard. Xenoblade 2, my masculinity 0. And within this game, I got to experience the actual peak voice acting from Adam Howden, who honestly is amazing. It must be so fun to be a voice actor. And I got to experience Shulk's story, the story that began this entire trilogy. And do I really need to say what everyone says about Xenoblade Chronicles 1? It is one of the best stories in games. It is insanely good and well written. But not only that, not only is it good because of things like I keep saying, a certain person's performance, but it's because everyone in the cast brings their A game. This entire cast of characters is insanely well written, performed, everything. And when I played this game, it was very apparent how bad Xenoblade 2's performances at times were. Again, that is nothing to do with the voice actors. It was very much the voice direction and directors who didn't give them the opportunity to give their best performances. From interviews, if you want to know, Xenoblade 2 was a very much read the line, that's it, we're done, we're moving on. And all the voice cast in the games are super talented. Every person has lines that are really bad, and they have lines that are really fucking good. Even the worst one that a lot of people point to, Rex, has some really good performance moments in Xenoblade 2, but enough of that, back to 1. Xenoblade 1 is insanely good, and I would recommend it to anyone, and I mean anyone, as to me, Xenoblade 1 is a definitive gaming experience, and honestly to me, it's perfect. There is nothing I dislike about Xenoblade 1. My top 5 games, that is it. There is nothing I dislike about them, and I love them entirely. And I know a lot of people might point out certain things. To me, they're not issues. But you might ask, why do I prefer Xenoblade 2 to Xenoblade 1? I see Xenoblade 2 has issues, and they are issues to me, like the tutorials and the really bad voice acting at times. So why is Xenoblade 1 a lesser game to me? Well, the story to me wasn't as focused on pushing that emotional element, the thing that really moved me. It's a great story, don't get me wrong, and it does have really good moments, but to me, it didn't have that moment that really pushed me into a point. Yes, I did tear up at it, but I didn't cry as much. And I think that's kind of the point though. And it's not a bad thing. Xenoblade 1's story isn't really about a topic that would move you that sort of way. Xenoblade 2 was about the potential of your power not being enough to protect those you love. That's Rex's entire story, about him finding that strength to do so. But Xenoblade 1 was more about you not having the power to stand up against an overwhelming force, but find it. Both games tell, all things considered, the same overall story, just with slightly different semantics. I mean, there's a reason why the two games mirror each other so much. There's a reason why locations sort of mirror each other. There's a reason why all the music mirrors each other. They're counterparts. Each game's story is two sides of the same coin, but each side of a coin is called something different and has a different pattern on it. And of course, to me, you either pick one or two of these. Most Xenoblade fans will say they either prefer one or two, and there's a reason for that. People either prefer the more emotional story of Xenoblade 2, or the more sort of focused, tight narrative and sort of twists and turns of Xenoblade 1. They're both amazing stories, genuinely, and it's kind of difficult to really compare the two and really say one is better than the other unless you really start nitpicking them. But it wasn't just a port and sort of a nice paint job. It also got some nice DLC added onto it, which, according to the developers, told us the future of the Xenoblade franchise and where it was going to go. And it was pretty good. It had some really great music that I really enjoyed, but it was a bit meh. The story was very much just hinting at the future of Xenoblade and sort of building up to the reveal of what comes next. It's nothing crazy. You don't actually need to play it. Future Connected is the most skippable part of the Xenoblade franchise, and I mean that. Because even the story, unlike Torna, it isn't that great, to be honest. It is nice though to see Shulk and Melia again, two of the best characters from Xenoblade 1. Melia is my second favorite character in Xenoblade 1, so it was very nice to get both of them back, but it just felt like they could have definitely done more with it. But playing Xenoblade 1, I realized how much I had changed personally within those few years. I was completely different now. I was not that 15-year-old boy that I was playing these games. I was now 17 and going into my last years of secondary school, about to start adulthood, and this game was one of the ones that did see me off, which was really nice that it was Xenoblade. And it was almost poetic to me because these games felt like they really raised me in my most formative years of life, which I know is weird to say, but I don't know how else to say it, to be honest. But I was very happy with Xenoblade 1. Honestly, I could have stopped playing Xenoblade there and they would still be up there as some of my favorite games of all time, but there was murmurings, there was rumors online about Monolith's next game, murmurings about a sequel or another Xenoblade game. At the time, it was either believed it would be Xenoblade X2 or Xenoblade 3, if I remember correctly, but no one knew exactly what game it was going to be, but I was very, very excited and optimistic for whatever they brought out next, Monolith Soft. And Monolith Soft, if you want to know, they're one of my favorite developers now. They're a developer that I always keep my eye on, and I'm always playing whatever they're going to release. So yeah, I'm excited for whatever comes next from them. Hopefully it's Xenoblade 4. But I have one more game that I want to talk about from this year. I want to highlight a game that I think is kind of didn't get a lot of attention and is truly, and I mean this, a hidden gem of a game. A lot of people do say this about this game, so it's kind of lost its meaning, but I still do think it's a very much a hidden gem that people kind of overlook and kind of go, yeah, don't want to play it. And that is Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE Encore. Yes, the title was a mouthful, but it was originally called Tokyo Mirage Sessions blah blah blah. So just looking at it, let me explain why this game is actually pretty cool. First of all, the game was developed as a collaborative game between both Intelligent Systems from Nintendo, who developed Fire Emblem, the Sharp FE part, and the developers for Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, Atlas, the TMS part. And you want to know something crazy about this game? It's actually crazy good. TMS came out in 2015. It takes elements from Fire Emblem and then blends them really well with elements of Shin Megami Tensei, and even Persona, like its social sim life sort of stuff. as well. It's honestly a really cool game that blends the two games together in a really nice way. Now, it's definitely more Shin Megami Tensei than Fire Emblem in how its combat works and everything like that, but it did something interesting. It did a lot of what Persona 5 did before Persona 5, and how the game's structured, sort of like the palaces. They literally have palaces in this game, which I thought was insanely cool. How the combat is as well. And you might ask them, why did it not do as well as something like Persona 5? Why did it not blow off and be nominated for Game of the Year? Why was it kind of forgotten and sort of left in the dust? Well, there's a good few reasons for that, which are pretty obvious. One, this game was on the Wii U. No one played this game. This game didn't get a good chance to really flourish, like, well. And when they released it on the Switch, it sold way better, and it definitely got a bit more of an audience, but unfortunately ports never do as well as new games, and I think if this game was sort of released then, it would have done significantly better if the Wii U had sold way better. And two, it's too Japanese for most people. It just is. I see people saying that that isn't the problem. It is. The game is focused on idols and the sort of idol scene in Japan. That is what the game is based on. And people will say, well, there's things like Ushinoko, which are super popular, which are based on idols. This is extremely based on idol. This is all the game is basically about, is the idol world. And well, I find that fascinating because I find that part of Japan super interesting. A lot of people don't. Some people don't like the more Japanesey, cutesy stuff. They find it kind of weird, for a lack of better word. And it's a game that you would not be able to convince certain people to play. I couldn't. There is no way in hell I could convince any of my friends to play a game like this. No chance in hell. It limits its potential reach just by the way it looks and the way it sounds. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's still a great game though, I will be completely honest. The game fucking slaps. Not only does it have great music, it has great gameplay, it's a pretty decent story, pretty fun characters, but it's nothing too insane. It is not on the level of something like Persona. It isn't, or even Shin Megami Tensei, or Xenoblade, or Fire Emblem. It is nothing that level. It was a game made by developers who wanted to make something extremely interesting and something extremely fun, and that's what it is, fun. It's a super fun game, and I wholeheartedly recommend that you try it out and play it. We will never get another game like this from Atlus and Nintendo unless something insane happens, but it was a fun little experiment they did. But now, 2021 was the year everyone hates in gaming. It was a quiet one. With the pandemic delaying a lot of games and 2020 being an actual insane year for gaming in general, like 2020, look it up, go to year, it had no chance, 2021, to be a big bombastic year with a lot of cool games and a lot of excitement. It was going to be a quiet year. But despite that, 2021 did have some great games obviously come out, and with one of them great games was my game of the year, released on Switch and was exclusive to Switch. That game being So Metroid Dread is a really good game. I know, only brave statements on this channel, but you want to know something else? This was also my first Metroid game. Leave me alone, being a kid with no money is hard. But Metroid Dread was my first Metroid game, and yeah, it's great. And anyone who stated this game didn't deserve to be nominated for Game of the Year because it's 2D, please stop saying silly things on the internet, you just look silly. Metroid Dread did 3 key things that any game needs to do to make me fall in love with it and believe it deserves to be a Game of the Year nomination. It had tight, simple gameplay, which had a high skill ceiling, music that goes way harder than it needs to go, and it's paced extremely well in terms of its level design and also just overall game pacing. These are 3 aspects which games need to master to even be worthy of being called Game of the Year. And Metroid Dread did all of these with textbook execution. It's like a perfect example of what a Game of the Year quality game should be. While a certain other game that came out that year as well, Resident Evil 8, failed to meet certain expectations I had for it, especially in these key departments, mainly its pacing and such. But Nintendo, yeah, please hurry up and give me another Metroid 2D game because I actually prefer them to the Prime games, which I'm also very surprised about. But we also got some other cool games. We got a Pokemon game that actually looked nice called New Pokemon Snap from Bandai Namco, and I mean, it's an on-rail shooter, so it better look good. A new WarioWare. I love WarioWare, and I love Wario. Monster Hunter Rise. I'm not a big Monster Hunter fan. I can't. I've never clicked with the games personally. They are good games though. I can see that clearly. Just the way they control just doesn't feel intuitive to me, and I feel like my brain is too dumb to really understand it. I've tried 3 times, just never clicked with them. However, imagine this. Just play with me, just imagine. You see murmurings online, discussions and acclaim from an insider whose reputation was spotless. They've never been wrong. They've always been scarily accurate, like they themselves are the people making the games. And their words just state, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Remake. The DS game that ate all my free time up as a child, the game that began my journey with gaming in general, my first true game that I really got into. To say I was excited about the prospect of a Diamond and Pearl remake, akin to something like Auraz, the Ruby and Sapphire remakes, is an understatement. This is a game I've been waiting for years. Ever since Auraz, I've been waiting for a Diamond and Pearl remake. The excitement I felt was like when you're a young child sitting on Santa's lap asking what you want for Christmas. And you ever thought about how weird that is? How you let a child sit on a stranger's lap and talk about what they want for Christmas? It's weird how society got there, isn't it? But Diamond and Pearl are one of my favorite Pokemon games. They're not my favorite, but they're definitely in the top 3. And the Sinnoh games themselves are my favorite games. Platinum is my favorite Pokemon game, so Diamond and Pearl are very close behind. It's a region that I think has one of the better plot lines. It has one of the better sort of just overall flows for the game. It has some of the better Pokemon designs as well. In my opinion, it is one of the best regions that Pokemon has ever created in terms of everything it actually offered. And I was begging, pleading, hoping to God himself that this game would be the game that Game Freak would get back on track with. It'd be a return to form for Game Freak, what they used to be able to make, actual good quality, simple JRPGs that have a lot of heart in them. All I wanted them to do at a minimum though was make a passable Pokemon game. And was it worth waiting almost 20 years for this game? Please take it back. I don't want it. I guess I have to talk about this game, and I just sort of have to say the same thing every person has said about this game. Pokemon BDSP is the most difficult game to actually talk about critically, because if you look at it through a critical lens and you just look at it in isolation, it's Pokemon Diamond and Pearl again. That means everything that I like about Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, it has. It has the good region, the good map, the good Pokemon designs, it has the good flow, it has everything that I like about Diamond and Pearl, plus a bit more. It improves some bits and bobs here and there. So overall, if you really get down to it, it probably is better than Diamond and Pearl. But I don't care. The games look so bland and they feel so lifeless. And I know that it was a completely different developer that made this, Ilka, who had never made a game before. And to me, this is why Game Freak and the Pokemon Company in general, why they are just not what they used to be. It's very clear to me they didn't give two shits about the Diamond and Pearl remake. They wanted to squirt it out as fast as possible to make as much money as possible. They knew this was one of the most anticipated remakes, and they just half-arsed it. BDSP isn't terrible, don't get me wrong. If you haven't played Diamond and Pearl, or Platinum, it's good. It's good. It's probably the best Pokemon game on the Switch, apart from a certain other one, in terms of how it actually flows and everything. Because again, it's Diamond and Pearl, so it's good in that sense. But comparing it to what I experienced all the way back on the DS and how just completely new them games were, it was very lazy. I adored the original games, and I really thought Game Freak would pay a lot of respect to the games that are some of the most successful in the entire franchise, which is Diamond and Pearl. And it kind of made me realize that Game Freak they don't care about the games they make. They only care about pushing their franchise faster forward. The Platinum editions that were omitted from the game as well were very odd. But again, like Auraz, that didn't have things from Emerald, so I kind of expected that to happen and I didn't get my hopes up. But it still wasn't nice. BDSP, it just was lifeless. The charm from the original games wasn't in it, and it just showed how Game Freak just didn't have that potential anymore, how they were just lazy and they didn't want to make a magical experience of a game again for the next generation. They just wanted to make games fast and push the Pokemon franchise further forward to make as much money as possible. If I had to describe this game as a breakfast cereal, it would be soggy cornflakes. There is no personality to it. It isn't, like, terrible. You can eat it, but you're not going to get anything from it. It's good enough, it'll fill you up, but you're not going to be happy about eating it. But for me as well, it just did not scratch the itch I desperately wanted it to scratch. Nostalgia is the thing that people always complain about. They say companies use it against you and everything, but I think using nostalgia in a good way can be good for people. It is a way to make games feel more special, especially to them older fans. There are games that I have gone back and played, or games that have been remade more recently that I played their original versions, and it's a magical experience to be able to relive their memories again that when I first played this game and then make new memories playing the remake. recently the Oblivion remaster came out, and I'm sure people who play the original Oblivion, they're getting all their memories relived in their head again of when they were younger playing the game. And I'm sure I will experience that with many other games in the future. But this was the game I desperately wanted it to be, was the Diamond and Pearl remakes. And the fact that it's now been made means we will never get another Diamond and Pearl remake. Again, we won't. We haven't got another Gold and Silver remake yet since Heart Gold and Soul Silver, so I don't believe we will ever get a Diamond and Pearl remake ever again. But man, just entering Eterna Forest in those games, the location that sticks to my head so much and just brings me back that music when I was very young, hiding under my covers with my DS, playing my DS when I wasn't meant to, just listening to rain outside and just that one single jingle of that song. Being brought back to your childhood is a magical experience, and somehow the game creators at Game Freak somehow did it. And the exact music I used here to try visualize my emotions actually happened to me in this game, Legends Arceus. To me, Legends Arceus is the best Pokemon game since Pokemon Black 2, White 2. It's honestly the only Pokemon game in recent years that I actually really enjoyed playing all the way through. And it is one that reminded me the most of those old games that I fell in love with pre-Gen 5. And it made me love Pokemon again, which was honestly something I hadn't thought in a long time because I started getting sick of the franchise. And despite the DS and Game Boy games being small in size physically, they always felt like very grand adventures in interesting worlds that we need to explore, and Legends Arceus reflected that perfectly to me, where the other games couldn't. X and Y didn't feel like a grand adventure, it felt like a little tour around a city. Sun and Moon felt very handholdy and it felt like you're on a school trip. Gen 8 was terrible, Sword and Shield. It just did not feel good at all to play through, and again, it felt like a school trip in a way, or like you're doing a fucking Duke of Edinburgh thing. It just didn't feel like an adventure. Legends Arceus though, that did feel like an adventure and reminded me a lot of the older Pokemon games. Legends Arceus was, honestly, the last Pokemon game I was going to get, if it was bad. If it was terrible, if it let me down, I would never buy another Pokemon game again. And yeah, the Game Freak, they somehow clutched in the last second, and I really hope they will continue making good games in this style and of this quality consistently. Now, of course, Legends Arceus isn't anything super insane. It even has its own issues with performance, graphics, everything like that. But it was finally nice to see the company that I felt like just couldn't give a shit about the games themselves actually give us something more creative and something that seemed like they actually put some more passion into. Where BDSP felt like a shitty recreation of Diamond and Pearl, Legends Arceus actually felt like a heartfelt love letter to them old games from the developers. With its music, locations, battles, and Pokemon, it just felt special. It felt heartfelt, and it felt like the developers actually did care and wanted to make a good game for the fans. If you want my honest opinion, I actually don't think they should have made BDSP. I think BDSP should have just not been made. They should have left it and maybe make it another year. But Legends Arceus did make me feel like that child again, hiding under my covers with my DS all them years back. I really hope Legends games as well would have been the new mainline series, like they would have just replaced them, because in my opinion they are significantly better in quality. Of course, not everyone gets the wish they want and they didn't do this, but they were great. Honestly, if you want a suggestion for a Pokemon game, play this one if you can't play anything from the DS back, because it's the best one in my opinion. However, 2022 wasn't just about Legends Arceus. Of course, it was probably my most anticipated, well, the one that I really sort of was scared about, not my most anticipated though. There was a few other games though. Kirby and the Forgotten Land, being the first 3D Kirby game, was pretty good and pretty fun, I will be honest. Splatoon 3, another goddamn Splatoon game. I don't know how they make these so fast, and I expect the Switch 2 to have one within the first year. Bayonetta 3, I do love me some action adventure hack and slash games. While I personally prefer DMC a bit more, Bayonetta is still good fun. A new Switch sports game, which wasn't as good as Wii Sports, I'll be honest. I actually don't think the Wii Sports games can ever be remade. I honestly think they were like a lightning in a bottle game that could only be made on the Wii hardware, with all of its sounds, the way the Wiimote worked, its visuals. I just don't think it can be redone. And I think Switch Sports kind of showed that. It's basically the same game, but it just doesn't feel as fun as Wii Sports in a weird way. A new Warriors game with a new coat of paint. I mean, I wish Nintendo would allow other developers to make spin-offs from their own franchises akin to Warriors games, because I feel like we've gotten so many Warriors games now, and like none of them are that special. I mean, even other franchises get their own Warriors games. I would just love to see some more stuff be made as spin-offs for Nintendo games in general, but I would take a Xenoblade Warriors game, I will be honest. But from one Pokemon game to now another.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing.
Yeah, Pokemon fucking sucks. Game Freak just couldn't help themselves. They went from making the best Pokemon game in years to, I'm going to say this with full chest and I mean it entirely, the worst Pokemon game they have ever made, and I mean that. I do not like Scarlet and Violet, straight up. Where Sword and Shield had things I like, Scarlet and Violet, I hate everything about it. It is a game that I just do not like. I do not like how its open world works. I don't like how it doesn't actually encourage a non-linear exploration path in the open world itself. I don't like how easy the games are getting again. I don't like a lot of the Pokemon designs. I don't even like a lot of the music, which was kind of strange for me because Pokemon normally has pretty good music, but I felt like Scarlet and Violet was very forgettable. The performance of the game as well, somehow even worse. It felt like Game Freak was making the first game on the Switch again. They somehow forgot about everything they ever did. And also, it looks worse compared to not only Legends Arceus, but I actually think it looks worse than Sword and Shield as well. The game's flow was terrible in general. I can't understate that how bad this game flowed in terms of its progression and everything. I just didn't gel with this game overall. The plot of the idea of the 3 different plot lines was a cool idea, terribly executed, and just didn't work very well. And the DLC was ass in my opinion. It was terrible. It was even worse than Sword and Shield's DLC, which in my opinion was possible. This DLC was very boring and I didn't like it, and I barely played it. The thing about Scarlet and Violet is I was really willing and open to it with all of its trailers and everything. I was very willing to give it a fair chance. And it just seems like they weren't willing to make the changes that people were praising them for from Legends Arceus. I know people will say that this game was well into development, but again, it just shows that they're not thinking years ahead and ensuring that the games are the best quality. They're just making games for the sake of making games because they know people will buy them. So yeah, going from something amazing to right back to the same shit again, and I'm betting Generation 10 will be the exact same shit. But if the next Pokemon game is bad, I will not buy another Pokemon game. So what's the next Pokemon game? Of course it's another Legends game, so I bet I'm gonna buy that and I'm gonna enjoy it. Well, it's a bit of a shit way to the end of the year, isn't it? If only there was another JRPG that would emotionally break me and move me from its beautiful tale of 2 people fighting for their true love. Fighting in order to live, and living to fight. The very first words we saw of Xenoblade 3, and instantly it hooked me. To me, this is the hardest game to talk about in the trilogy. So first of all, let's bring up that tally from earlier about me crying at it. I can't put enough tallies. Yeah, my masculinity is finished. If the first 2 games moved me emotionally, Xenoblade 3 broke me. I lost count how many times I got emotional with this game. But real quick, if you're planning on playing this game, make sure you play the other 2 first, because they are very much a 3-course meal. You can eat the other 2 in whatever order, but just don't eat dessert first. Make sure you leave 3 for last, because it is the most satisfying game to ever play if you play them first 2 games. This game's story, as best as I can describe it, is just an absolute emotional roller coaster, where you feel fine at one point, you feel absolute pure despair and depression at the very next scene. And at the center of all of it is a relationship between 2 characters, Noah and Mio, a classic love story about 2 people from opposing worlds who are forbidden to fall in love. It is the classic Romeo and Juliet story, with the world itself pulling them apart. But despite everything, they will destroy the current world itself just so they can make a new one where they can be together. I wonder who they learnt that from. All 3 Xenoblade games are about fighting for those you love and a future you want to make for them, and Xenoblade 3 is no different. But what Xenoblade 3 also explored, unlike the previous 2 games, was also the negative side of what love can lead to. It can lead to obsession, losing oneself in trying to solve and fix everything for someone else. Sometimes in a relationship you might feel like you need to give the one you love the world itself, but that's not what people want. They just want to spend the time with the person they love until they reach the end. We cherish things in life because they end. We realize that what we find beautiful will one day die and wither away, but that doesn't make it any less beautiful. If anything, it makes it more special that you were able to be graced by its presence in the small amount of time that we're all granted in life. And this game, I honestly think I played it at the perfect time in my life. And even the game itself isn't just about that relationship and the story of love. There is so much more in this game, from Lan, Senna, Tyon, and Yunie's story, who all of them get their own amazing story arcs and lessons they learned, and they never felt sidelined, despite them not being the two main characters. The many new side characters we would also get to meet and their own arcs and stories and lessons that you can learn from them. The super fun, super polished gameplay system that was basically polished to a T and amazing, and side quests that were actually really interesting and also told their own stories. And of course, certain older characters made a reappearance, mainly the two best girls from both games respectively, who they were an amazing part of the game and just the cherry on top. Honestly, I don't think I've done a good job of explaining why I love these games so much and why these games mean so much to me. Of course, one day I will make that video. Maybe it sounds dramatic, but they've taught me more about life, about hope, about resilience than almost anything else ever has. One day I hope I can pass these stories down and show them to my own children, and show them how even the smallest things in life can help guide you through some of the hardest times in life. Be it my own words telling them about the game, or if I don't get the chance to tell them that, the video I will make for these games one day will tell them that. If there's one thing I've learned from this and this trilogy, it's that love can be a guiding light. It can give you purpose, it can pull you through even the darkest days, but even the brightest light can be snuffed out. Dreams can end, people can change, and that's okay. It's okay to move on from the light that you once followed and looked towards for meaning. It took me a long time to learn that lesson, and it was hard for me to learn that lesson. Life will always lay 1,000 roads before you. Sometimes you'll stop, sometimes you'll run away from it, sometimes you'll fall to your knees, screaming in frustration, crying, begging for it to end, and that's okay too, because the roads will never stop appearing. You will always get the opportunity to walk down another, and each road leads to another one, and another, and another. It's easy to keep your head down and lose yourself in life, to let the world pass you by and just sort of walk along the roads aimlessly. But if you look up and if you choose a horizon that you want to walk towards, even if it's just a faint glimmer of what could be, life can be so much more than just living. It can be beautiful, it can be meaningful. Maybe the horizon you look towards is a dream you have, a calling, a career, a friend who needs you, a world you want to change. Maybe you have a child that you live for, or maybe it's love itself. Whatever it is, find it, walk towards it, because life will take your time, whether you use it or not in the way you want to. So make sure you make your time count. Keep walking until your clock runs out. It's quite emotional, wasn't it? But we ain't done quite just yet. 2023 is the second most important year of the Switch to me, because this was its final big hurrah, the final act of the story, and it felt like an actual final chapter for the Switch's life cycle, mainly for two big reasons. So first of all, yes, the sequel to my second favorite game of all time released, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which was a very important game for the Switch. And brave statement from me, it was good. Tears of the Kingdom is a better game than Breath of the Wild in almost every way. It has better gameplay, better puzzles, a better balanced world in my opinion as well, better music as well. I prefer it to Breath of the Wild's music, but I do like Breath of the Wild's music, don't get me wrong. And also a much better story that is far more engaging to actually play through, with an amazing final boss to end the pair of games on. It is amazing. However, Tears of the Kingdom to me didn't hit the same way that Breath of the Wild did. It didn't awaken that hunger that Breath of the Wild did in me, it fed it. I still think Tears is an outstanding game, but it was just Breath of the Wild, but more. So it wasn't as special as that first game. At this point, Elden Ring had also released, so Zelda wasn't the only one pushing what open worlds can be. If you want another example of a game that is very similar to this in its overall impact to me, the God of War games, mainly the reboot games. God of War 2018 is insanely amazing and was a breath of fresh air in the franchise. Ragnarok is, well, probably a better game. It is just the previous game, but better. You can't really fault the older game for the new game stuff, if you get what I'm putting down. Don't get me wrong, it's like eating your favorite meal again. It's amazing and you'll love every bite of it, but it will never be as magical as that first time you eat it. It might come with some extra sides on it, it will not be the same. However, I understand that this game can be what Breath of the Wild was to me for someone else, and I completely respect that and I can see that. It is one of the greatest games ever made, and I will full-heartedly say that. Tears is an amazing game, but it just didn't hit me the same way that Breath of the Wild did, which of course disappointed me in a way, but it is not a bad game. However, I do have one issue with Tears of the Kingdom. Its performance. Yeah, the Switch was really starting to show its age at this point. The game was painfully clearly pushing the Switch to its poor little limits. It just couldn't do it. Tears is a much more intensive game than Breath of the Wild. It has a much more complex world and much more complex game mechanics built into it. And I honestly think it's a shame at how poorly Tears of the Kingdom would run at times. I actually think it ruined the enjoyment I had of this game just a bit, because once I beat all the main quests and all the side quests and did a lot of the major content, I didn't continue playing the game. I have only 50 hours in Tears of the Kingdom compared to my 400 in Breath of the Wild, which, yes, 50 hours is still a lot, but looking at what I played in Breath of the Wild, it's a lot less, and I've only played the game once, which even I found surprising that I don't want to go back and play it. That might change with the next gen Switch 2 version, but I ain't paying for that, I'm sorry. Tears is an amazing game, don't get me wrong, and I think if you haven't played it, wait for the Switch 2 version. Yes, it is more expensive, but I do think it will lead to a much better experience. And also, I think this should be the last Zelda game in the Breath of the Wild style. I'm not saying don't do open world Zelda anymore, I just think Zelda needs to go further beyond now. Their next big mainline Zelda game needs to be as big of a jump that Skyward Sword was to Breath of the Wild. I don't think these small half steps are enough, in my opinion, for what Zelda is, because Zelda is the biggest franchise that does push the industry often the furthest forward, the fastest. Now, 2023 wasn't just two specific games, obviously. There was a lot of stuff in this year. It was a goated year, not just for Nintendo, but also the industry as a whole. It honestly is one of the best years in gaming in general. But for the Switch specifically, we had some great games. Mario Wonder, which, yes, it 100% deserved the Game of the Year nomination. I'm saying that with full chest. It is an insanely good 2D platformer and was beautifully made by Nintendo and actually was a lot better than their previous 2D Mario games. A new Pikmin game with Pikmin 4, which actually somehow got created. I still haven't played any Pikmin games, which I will do one day, but people seem to really enjoy this game, and it was really nice to see Nintendo was still willing to make more games in franchises that are not as popular as the big sort of dogs of Nintendo's lineup. Metroid Prime Remaster released as well, which it's Metroid Prime, so of course it's a good game. It is like one of the games of all time, so go play it if you haven't. And a JRPG, Fire Emblem Engage, and okay, Fire Emblem Engage is a good game. It is. Its gameplay is really good. It makes a lot of improvements to the Fire Emblem formula to create a more interesting and enjoyable game to play. Also, the many character appearances from previous games is a fun little delight, and it is just nice little sweet treats that you get in the game. I even like the game's more anime art style and the more cheesy anime dialogue, because again, I'm a weeb, and I also really like the music. And I understand that some people didn't, but I don't mind it. It's fine, I like it. However, I do have one complaint. Going from Three Houses, which was really story strong and very story focused, and that was my main reason for enjoying Three Houses, it was like whiplash to me going into Engage. Engage does not have a great story. It doesn't. It is very simple. It is like generic anime story simple. It is painfully simple, which is kind of a shame to me because of the whole premise of the game, of the returning characters from previous games, which could have made a really fun story, but they kind of just sort of played it very safe and made a very simple story, which is the main reason I fell in love with Fire Emblem, was because the stories were so good. And also the character interactions were a lot weaker in this game as well. The characters did not feel anywhere near as fleshed out as Three Houses characters did. However, despite this, each game has weaknesses where the other has strengths, and strengths where the others have weaknesses. Three Houses has pretty weak gameplay in terms of Fire Emblem standards, and a lot of people do state this. And Engage gave really good gameplay in general, and a lot of people say it's one of the better Fire Emblem games for gameplay itself, and to be honest, I do agree. However, once I beat Engage, I was still really craving a good story from Fire Emblem, so I decided to go out and pick up Awakening. But that wasn't everything. There was a new WarioWare game, and I do love WarioWare. It's a very fun game, genuinely. I actually really like Wario. But other than that, pretty quiet. If only there was another JRPG that would make me so hype I couldn't believe what I was actually playing was real. No, I'm not talking about Xenoblade 4. That doesn't exist, silly. I'm talking about...
I like your attitude, kiddo. Huh? Leave it to Uncle Rex. Oh my God! I'll show him a thing goes free.
Holy fuck, Xenoblade Future Redeemed. Words cannot describe how insane and fun this DLC was to not only play but experience. The only word that I can use to describe it was I loved it, and that is it. Future Redeemed is the culmination of the entire Xenoblade saga up until this point. It cleans up the storyline, answering some questions that were left unanswered, but it leaves enough there to allow for future stories to blaze their own path. This DLC is honestly like an amazing season finale to a show. It just gets you hyped up, you have some great moments, but it teases you for what could come next, keeping you salivating for more. It's something I don't think I will ever get to experience again in gaming. It's truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience for someone who is this invested in the series. And despite all the hype moments and insanity and how the story was focused on setting up the future, it still takes the time to tell a really good story. A story which focuses on a new protagonist who is full of beans and a familiar woman from a previous game. But more importantly to me, and probably most Xenoblade fans, was we get to re-meet the two best boys from the previous games, Shulk and Rex, who in this DLC we get to see them as they've grown up a bit and become parents, and the story follows them being reunited with their children. Well, Rex only gets reunited with one of them because Rex is a respectable, strong man and he has a very large family, if you know you know. But honestly, it's so interesting to me to see how these two characters interacted with their kids in different ways, and how each of them not only spoke to their kids, but how they spoke to each other about parenting as well. It's such cool character development, and it also leads into some actual good moments in the story and for the characters as well. However, the DLC to me was made most special with Rex's entire arc. This DLC has firmly made Rex my favorite Xenoblade character, who you might think is for certain reasons. If you know, you know. I'm not going to spoil it, and I'm not going to show the picture that everyone knows about. He's respectable. But no, I found it just charming to see the boy that we started with in Xenoblade 2, who was a boy, grow up into a man, and by the end of the game he became a man, and now we see the final result of him in that journey. He became a father, and it's just nice to see just that story come to an end with Rex and how he became who he looked up to the most, characters like Van Damme and Zeke. It's honestly just like having the best flavor ice cream after a just super fulfilling meal. I could eat it forever, but everything that came before it was what made the final bite so much more special. If you think you might enjoy Xenoblade, play it. And if you do enjoy Xenoblade, please make your way to this DLC. I'm not going to spoil any more of it. It is the best part of Xenoblade to me for just how hype it is and how fun it is to actually see the story come to an end. It's entirely worth it playing all three of the games all the way through to get to this point. It ended a 6-year journey for me, but I'm sure the story of these characters and these worlds are far from over. And I mean far from over. I will do a video on these games one day to show my love and how much I actually just adore the stories they tell, but I will leave that for another time. Play Xenoblade so we get more, please. 2024 was a really quiet year for the Switch. Outside of the Switch, though, it was really good. It was a really good year. But for the Switch, it was quiet as hell. This is going to be the shortest year. There was not too many crazy games that came out, and I didn't actually play anything that came out this year, mainly because this is when my YouTube channel started, and that's when I started getting really into YouTube. But I'll go through some of the games, mainly the ones I thought were cool, and I am intending on playing eventually. I just haven't played them yet because they weren't cool enough for me to really go out and play them. Princess Peach Showtime, which was a Princess Peach game. It looked cool, but it didn't look like I would enjoy it personally, so I didn't get it, and I don't plan on playing it because it just doesn't look like a game I would enjoy. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remaster. I need to play this one because this is called the best Paper Mario game out of them all. So I will play it one day, as I haven't played it, but it is an all-time classic game, so yeah, it's good. You don't need me to tell you that. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is too expensive what it is. It is a port of a 3DS game. It's way too expensive, and I haven't paid for it. I might play it one day, but not now. I'm sorry, it's too expensive. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom actually looked really cool, and I was going to play it, but I just never got it. Some games that happens with me. I think they're going to be cool. I want to get into them, but I just never really get super excited for them, and then they kind of just come out, and I never get them, and then I never play them. I'll probably play it one day if it's like really cheap at like a secondhand game shop. I'll pick it up, but I don't know. I just didn't get it for some reason. It is good though, apparently. I saw a lot of good reviews for it. Super Mario Party Jamboree. I like Mario Party, but I haven't played one in a long time because I don't have anyone to play them with. Mario and Luigi Brothership was apparently okay, but IGN gave it a 5 out of 10 for some reason. I did see a couple of big YouTube reviewers say they didn't like it. I don't know. I honestly don't know with this game. It looks fun. It looks fine to me. The main YouTuber I saw who said it was bad also said Xenoblade was bad, and then they proceeded to make 3 apology videos. So yeah, I don't even know what to think. It looks fine, honestly. But if you're going to make an opinion, at least stand on it. That's what I think. But most importantly, Nintendo released a music app, which was terrible. They proceeded to drip feed us music on this app instead of just releasing all the music in one go. So thank you, but no thank you. I'm going to stick to using YouTube to listen to the music I like from the Nintendo games. This was very much the epilogue year of the Switch. 2023 to me was the final chapter. This is just sort of the after year. This was there for you to basically play any games you didn't get the chance to and catch up on stuff. Or for me, it was for playing certain other JRPGs. But also, it was very clear that the Switch 2 was coming next year. Everyone was saying it. Nintendo hadn't officially revealed it, but it was very clear the Switch 2 was coming next year. So I guess we just should move on to...
Can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man.
I actually played more this year than last year already, which is kind of funny. DK Country Returns HD. A great game. I love Donkey Kong Country Returns. However, it is a bit expensive, and I will admit that. Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition finally got released on Switch, and I'll be honest, I haven't beaten it yet. I have been very slowly playing through it, which is a bit different for me. I normally I get addicted and I bomb them completely in 2 weeks maximum, but this one's lasted me over a couple months now. It's a game I've been picking up for 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'm just not that invested in it, I guess. It's kind of hard to explain. The story isn't as focused on, so it's kind of harder to get really invested into it when that was the main thing you got invested into with the previous Xenoblade games, and what made me not put them down for hours straight, because I remember I played Xenoblade 1 for 12 hours straight when that came out. Fuck me. But it's still a great game. I still really do enjoy it, and I do want to beat it. I don't want it to be one of them games that sort of wastes away on my backlog and never gets finished. So I will try finish it one day. But other than that, that honestly is it. That is the end point of the Switch's life cycle, as the next game releasing for the Switch comes out after the Switch 2. So yeah, that's it from my perspective and every game that I played. Yes, I know there's probably a couple games I didn't mention. Not because either A, I don't like them, or B, I haven't played them. I actually have played a lot of the Switch's library. I've played most games pre-2022. But I wanted to only display the games to me that embody what the Switch was mainly for me. And what was the Switch for me? Well, it was the Xenoblade machine, of course. I'm only kidding. To me, the Switch embodies Nintendo at their best and most competitive. When they released industry-changing games back-to-back in the same year. When old franchises came back with a vengeance, or a wet fart in some cases, or brand new franchises that I had never discovered before, I fell in love with, just like them old franchises. And not only that, some new franchises were also birthed from this Switch as well. The Switch to me is the reason I fell in love with gaming again. When other companies felt soulless and they were failing me and I wasn't enjoying my time with games anymore, the Switch was always fun. For the past 8 years I've owned it, it has been nothing but fun. Every game I've played on it, I have enjoyed. I have never been disappointed with a game I've picked up akin to other games that I've bought on other platforms. It has been fun from the first time I turned it on, all the way back on my 15th birthday, to the time I will turn it off for the last time on June 4th. But of course, the reason for that is the games themselves. And the two most important games to me on the Switch were being Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade 2. Two games I played in the first year of owning it, and they're games I will remember for the rest of my life. The Switch has led me to find so many more games I love, but not only that, it has led me to other platforms where games exist that also changed my life. With a certain JRPG, I hold completely responsible for discovering it because of the Switch. However, no matter how much I love the Switch, and I think it is honestly perfect with how it presented its games and its support by first parties and even third parties to an extent, there is still some things I do not like about it, and nothing in life is ever perfect. So I guess we should talk about...
Is that? Oh, shit.
Okay, this is where it's going to be me negative now, which is something I don't really do on this channel. So bear with me. So from the things everyone hates, like Joy-Con drift, which yes is annoying and no one likes them, and they were never truly addressed, which was a very bad look for Nintendo, and I don't think they ever will. I expect the Switch 2 to have the same issues that the Switch 1 has with its Joy-Cons, so don't use them. Buy a Pro controller, not the new one, the old one, because that Pro controller has lasted me 7 years, longer than any PS5 controller has. Next up, the laggy and cluttered piece of shit eShop, a terrible fucking thing they have made, as well as their terrible online services, which is now charged for compared to the Wii U despite them not actually offering anything unique, and the benefits they offer with this online service are inconsistently used across games, like cloud saves, which certain games don't let you use. Why the fuck do you need to pay for cloud saves first of all? Because Steam offers you cloud saves on every game you own for free. It's insane to me that Nintendo think they can charge for this, and they still do. I don't pay for it though, because fuck that. However, a big issue I had with the Switch in general was almost its lack of any quirky personality that all previous Nintendo consoles have had. They've all had their fun personalities, from the Wii U, which had Miiverse, the Wii and its music and its fun menus, or the GameCube. Do I need to say any more? Cube. I could go on and on, but the Switch was very much just a piece of hardware. It was very modernistic and it was very bland in my opinion. It was clean and simple, and I like that, but it was not fun looking or sounding in any way, shape or form. The best thing it had was the little snap and click noise that you got when you put the fucking Joy-Cons on, and that was the most personality it had. It's a shame Nintendo's approach to their UIs has gone significantly worse over the years in my opinion, with them relying on things like online connectivity for them exact things instead of what they used to have, which were more inbuilt features in the consoles like the Wii U had or the Wii had. The Switch as well is one of the consoles I refuse to buy games digitally on because I just don't trust Nintendo with their online services anymore. It's been very clear that they don't like supporting these platforms long after they've finished their normal typical life cycle. The fact that the 3DS eShop is already dead is pretty crazy to me, considering that was still receiving games in 2018 and 2019. And yes, I know it's been a good few years after that, but all those games are now lost because Nintendo didn't really do anything. And it wouldn't be that hard to maintain these services just to allow people to buy games and download them. And that's because Nintendo, they don't care about game preservation. As soon as these eShops stop making as much money as they want and they cost more to keep up than let people buy stuff, they'll scrap them straight away. I am dreading when the NSO service comes to an end, either by the end of the Switch 2 when they probably might pivot to something completely different, or a few years after the Switch 2 comes out and the Switch 1 starts getting sunsetted and all of that stuff gets turned off for Switches. All them games will be lost and they'll drip feed them to us again. And on the topic of that, this is a massive one for me, game preservation. I'm a big believer in owning games physically. I try to buy any game I play physical, all of them. Even games I buy on Steam and I do videos on my channel, I will then try to buy the physical version of them later and down the line. I bought a copy of Signalis, I will buy a copy of Mouthwashing. I believe in owning physical games as this is the only way that we can preserve games and stop these dumbass fucking companies from taking things away from us, is by owning the physical copies. And of course some companies are now taking steps to prevent this by not putting the full game on the cartridge or disc. And Nintendo, yeah, they couldn't give a rat's ass about game preservation. They don't. Any company that says they believe in game preservation and then pushes a subscription-based model for playing games, they don't care. Xbox do not care about game preservation. They don't. Game Pass does not preserve games. As soon as that service comes to an end, all those games will be lost again if they weren't physically available. Now, despite this, I think Nintendo is still one of the better for it compared to Xbox and PlayStation. PlayStation's actually pretty good, to be honest. They're probably the best at doing this, but Xbox is the worst. Nintendo, obviously, they've had the big debacle of the game key cards, which, yes, they're worthless. If you're buying these, just buy the fucking digital version. Yeah, you can sell them and you can give them to a friend and stuff and they can download them, but if you're like me and you don't get rid of games once you buy them, there's no point to these things. They are literal paperweights. But everyone freaking out about the Switch 2 having these things, where the fuck were you in 2018 when LA Noire was fucking a download game? They've been doing this for years now and no one said anything. People freaked out because they thought all of the games were going to be like that. No, they're not. Most of the third-party ones will, because apparently Nintendo's being really difficult with game cards they're allowing them third parties to use. I think it's either an 8GB one or a 64GB one, and the 64GB one is really expensive to manufacture, so they lose a lot more money making a physical game that way. So you're going to see a lot of these publishers they're not going to bother. You're going to see very rare ones like CD Projekt Red, for example, who are going for the 64GB one, who big up them, I might buy that, but a lot of other ones, they can't. They don't have the money to do that. But the game key cards are just what they used to do. It's a renamed thing. It's like when Xbox renamed free next-gen upgrades to smart delivery. It's the exact same thing. It's just marketing lingo to try and make you like it in some way, because they've always been around and they always will be around. Same shit, different name, and yes, I hate it. The NSO emulators, I hate them as well. I hate subscription models, as I stated, and I think it's the worst way to support gaming companies in my opinion, because again, these services will eventually be turned off eventually, and you will never be able to access them games again, and all the money you put into it, you won't have anything to show for it. You will not have anything in the end. I know people say they don't like buying full price games, and you buy one game, that's like a year worth of Game Pass. Yeah, I see that and I understand that, but I'd still rather buy one game than buy a year worth of Game Pass, because I actually want to support the games I want to, and I have the money to do so. Gaming's always been like that, and I don't understand how it's now an issue to buy games at full price. Yes, I understand the increasing price constantly is an issue, but there's this little thing called waiting for discounts and buying secondhand games that you can do. I've picked up so many Switch games that I didn't pick up at launch that are now significantly cheaper. Most of them I've been picking up at half price their MSRP price tag. Just wait. It's fine to wait. And if you're like me and you actually dabble in retro gaming, you can buy games for pennies if you know what you're buying. The 360, pennies to buy them games. It is one of the cheapest consoles to buy for, so honestly, even Game Pass to me isn't worth the value that they're pushing. But also, it does appear to me that these subscription models aren't sustainable. They're just not. There's been a couple of developers who have said that they're putting their game on Game Pass has actually done more harm than help them. So I don't really know what to think of it, and I don't think it's a good thing for the industry. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more games not even consider going on Game Pass or making these exclusivity deals because they're just not worthwhile. But NSO is horrible. Honestly, it is terrible. Instead of Nintendo allowing us to buy the old virtual console games that we would want, they make you stream them. You can't download them like Game Pass, which Game Pass is actually pretty good for. You have to stream them, which I fucking despise. So if you don't have a good signal or good internet connectivity, yeah, good luck playing these games. The latency is terrible sometimes. I remember when the fucking N64 one came out, man, that was horrible. Games I would happily play and I would happily pay for to play, I just refuse to play them because I'm not playing them on this terrible experience. It's one of the worst ways to experience these games in my personal opinion. Of course, it's good if you physically cannot buy the original hardware or you don't have a PC that can emulate, that's fine. But these are just so poorly done, and honestly, I don't understand why Nintendo doesn't let us buy them. All I do is because they want to control what we play. There's a reason a lot of games haven't come out yet for NSO. There's a reason the Pokemon games on Game Boy Advance, all of them haven't come to NSO yet. It's because they don't want us playing certain games because they know it will harm the sales of certain other games. So again, it's just Nintendo being controlling, but that's no different to any other company like Microsoft, EA, who don't let you buy older versions of like FIFA, for example. It's just the same shit. All of the companies do it. They want to control what you play, so you buy the newest game. It's always been like that. But number 3, the games are expensive. Nintendo is almost allergic to reducing the prices now. I remember on the Wii and Wii U and 3DS, they used to do like Nintendo Selects lines, which were like, they'd half price the game and it would be out. And sometimes it would come with all the DLC. Really cool things that they did. Yeah, they don't do that now. They now increase the prices of games when they port them to the Switch, which is insanity to me. It's crazy to me that the launch game, Breath of the Wild, is still full price. Nintendo still print it and they still sell it for full price, which is crazy to me that they even can do that still, and that it's still financially viable for them to do that and not reduce it to increase the sales of it. The Switch has been the most expensive platform I have collected for. More than the PS5, more than the 360, more than the Xbox One, even more than some more retro ones that I've been collecting for recently. It is insanely expensive. And this fact that the games don't get discounted means that I just buy the games a lot of the time at launch because I know they're not going to drop in price. Any of the big games that release from Nintendo, like a Zelda or a Mario or the next DK, for example, or Mario Kart World, they will never drop in price. They will never do sales on them. Occasionally I might give you like a tenner off, but nothing worth waiting for. So I just buy them at launch because I know they're not going to drop in price, so I'd rather just get them as soon as possible. It's honestly a horrible thing that they don't even do it just to throw people who can't afford these games a bone, because they know people will buy them at launch, so I don't understand why they sit there on them and not reduce the price of them. What I do know is because they want to make as much money as possible. But it's just clear that Nintendo now has been showing their more corporate side a lot more recently. They've been super money focused recently, and I feel like something that was hidden before. I feel like Reggie from Nintendo of America, the old president of Nintendo of America, I think he did a lot better at actually hiding that greed a lot more than the current guy who's there, Doug Bowser, because it's very clear he just doesn't have the way Reggie had it, speaking with people and speaking to like audiences at shows and things. And I feel like he did a lot of good at Nintendo and actually was very pro-consumer, and he's had podcasts where he talks about things like, but when he made it very apparent that Wii Sports would be good as a packing title, because Nintendo actually wanted you to pay for that. Yeah, you know that Nintendo Switch 2 packing game that they're charging $10 for? Yeah, they were going to do that with Wii Sports. Imagine if they did that. No one would play it. No one. Well, then a lot of people did play Wii Play, which was like the same thing. You get my point though. It would have done a more harm than good. And Wii Sports is one of the like most loved games out there because it was a packing title, and that was because a certain person pushed for that to happen. But it's clear now that Nintendo doesn't have anyone that's really pro-consumer there anymore, and now they're going full fucking hog towards what they actually are, a very cash-hungry company, which is what they've always been. But of course, a few years back, they were better at hiding that. And also the lack of a pro version of hardware, I think, also led to a lot of issues. The OLED Switch was very pointless in my opinion, and it felt like Nintendo they didn't want to bother making a pro version. They just put out a new version of the console to shut people up, even though it wasn't what people wanted. Another one I didn't like was the lack of customization for your profile. So I don't know if you all know this, but on the Switch, you can change your profile picture. Did you know there's hundreds of these for specific games? Like any game you can think of that was a big first-party game, they have profile pictures, but they were limited time things that you had to have NSO for and platinum points to obtain. It's terrible how they handled this. Just let us have these. Why do we need to have NSO? Why do we need to have platinum points to obtain profile pictures that are limited time? It's terrible. I picked up a few that I wanted, of course, the Xenoblade ones, but none of the others are accessible anymore. So anyone that does get the Switch, they can't get any of these. It's so boring, and it just means that there's no personality you can even obtain from just buying the game initially. Of course, they occasionally rerun them, which is fine, but who wants to fucking keep an eye on social media channels to get a profile picture? Just let us buy them from the shop, for fuck's sake. Or better yet, make them free. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? That we didn't have to pay for it, but no, we still have to pay some sort of currency for it. Platinum points, which you earn by doing achievements for something, which they're discontinuing anyway. But enough of that. Let's look to the future for the Switch is clearly heading in one single direction. The Nintendo Switch 2, which man, that is a conflicting topic, isn't it? To preface, I myself have pre-ordered a Switch 2. Luckily enough, I was able to nab one for a normal standard price and not from a scalper. Please don't buy from scalpers, just wait. But I'm going to state some things that might sound conflicting, and you might question why I'm buying one in the first place. First of all, no, I do not like that Mario Kart World is $80 or £75 or whatever it is in your countries. I think it's 100 Australian dollars, I think. It's insane. It's stupid, and it's not the game that I think they should have pushed the $80 increase onto. I honestly expected them to do it for the next Mario or Zelda, but not Mario Kart. Mario Kart, it sells well enough already. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe made billions. It is the best-selling Switch game out of them all, I'm pretty sure. So them making this for 80 just seems conflicting. It's very clear they know this will sell. They will sell copies in the millions, potentially tens of millions within the first year. So they know they'll make way more money if they increase the price of it. But it's not only the fact that it's Mario Kart, it's also the fact that this will be very dangerous for the entire industry as a whole and for us as well. The increase to 80 will mean that all games will cost 80, and I mean that. 2K, EA, Ubisoft, Activision, Sony, they will all increase their standard price to 80 after the release of Mario Kart World. I predict that. Very few games will be sticking to the old price, which some games have been doing. From Software, for example, released Elden Ring at 60, which was very unusual. Well, it was 50 here in the UK, I'm not sure about the US. So I expect a lot of games to follow that increase in pricing to 80. I expect the next NBA to be 80 standard. I expect whatever Ubisoft release next will be 80, and they will all state that inflation, the increased price production of games, all of it, the same shit we keep hearing, it's unsustainable. They need to increase pricing to keep it sustainable. But when will that end? When will the price increases stop occurring? They won't. Game development is one of the most unsustainable business models at the moment because of how they are run. There is no amount of money we can pay per game to make it sustainable. As you increase the price, less copies will sell, meaning you're not making out much more money. It's unsustainable in all ways. Games are becoming too expensive to make. They are becoming too expensive to market. They're becoming too expensive for their own good. Spider-Man 2 was a game that should have been an easy moneymaker, but it struggled to make a profit because of how big its budget was. If you want to know, Spider-Man 2 on PS5 cost $300 million to make. Why? The game felt unfinished when it came out. It had some issues, it wasn't perfect, it had some really bad pacing issues as well. It was a game that did not feel like it cost the amount it did to make. To me, it felt like a pretty fast flip job, a 100 million at most game, but it was triple that. And most games now are minimum 100 million to produce, and most games don't make that sort of money back. The only way that this can be fixed in the industry is if game companies start to become comfortable again with making less expensive games. Nintendo is one of the only companies that is comfortable doing this, making smaller projects which will sell well. But most game companies, they don't do this. They don't believe it's worth their time, and it isn't. Most people don't support a lot of games. They don't buy a lot of games. So game companies aren't going to do it because we don't support them. Despite my issues with the pricing of the increase of games and everything, and how I don't think it's going to be personally worth the price they're selling it for, the price of the console was fine to me. The outrage around it saying it's too expensive, I don't know, it seemed pretty good for me for the price. I don't know why we're crying about this. I was expecting the base Switch 2 to be 400 at minimum, and it was that. A little bit less, but it was that. This thing can run Elden Ring and Cyberpunk. It is a powerful bit of kit. It is capable, and I think it's more future-proof than people actually realize. This is going to age a lot better than the first Switch, and I think people should be excited for what the Switch 2 is capable of. This is the first time in a long time that Nintendo have allowed their own first-party developers to have some pretty powerful hardware. God knows what the next Zelda, Mario, Xenoblade, all of these games, what they're actually going to be like. But complaining about the price of the Switch 2 was very odd to me. Yes, it's expensive. There is no way, shape of hell the performance people are demanding of the Switch 2 or a Switch Pro would be able to be achieved with the same price that the Switch sold for in 2017. It's impossible. As the power of a console increases, the price increases exponentially. And unfortunately, we're in a period of diminishing returns now. We have reached a point where increasing the amount of power a console or computer has, it results in less and less performance gain. We will never see as big of a performance jump that we had from the 5th generation to the 6th generation, or the 6th generation to the 7th generation. The next generational leap will be smaller than the last generation, and it will get smaller and smaller unless there is a massive breakthrough in computational performance. It's impossible. It is something that the most smartest people who design the CPUs, GPUs, and all other hardware cannot crack. The price has to increase for better performance. That's it. And the performance we're getting for that price seems fair to me. Again, I am not a super expert in that, but I do have a background in computer science. I do understand when they talk about specs. I understand what it all means. And to me, the Switch's performance and what it is capable of does seem worth that price. So that's my opinion. Now, yes, as I stated as well, though, the Switch 2 is doing game key cards, which, yes, are shit, but the Switch has been doing that for years. It is nothing different. But the one thing I don't like is Nintendo now charging for upgraded games. To me, charging $70 for a Breath of the Wild port is insanity. In my opinion, if Nintendo wanted to win, just win, and become the #1 console, they should have ported a lot of these older games and then said, yeah, they're 30, 40. That'd be amazing. A lot of people would say, well, I wouldn't want to pay for it, but then they'd offer the upgrades for you for a tenner. But if they sold these new games for 30, 40 as like the Nintendo Selects again, they would win instantly. It would be amazing to see that again. And to me, it would show that they're willing to actually port older games. But again, just look at the fucking games they've been porting. DK Country Returns HD at full price. I don't know why I expected that or why I thought better of that, but again, to me, these ports and these Switch 2 versions are only good if you don't have these games, but I do think these are good ports. I think Tears of the Kingdom will be great on Switch 2, and I think if you don't have it, I think you should buy it. But I do think it is a bit expensive, personally. I do think they should have discounted it a little bit, because it is an older game now. But despite all my issues around Nintendo as a company, and how I don't like how anti-consumer they're slowly starting to become, and how difficult they are seemingly to work with for third parties with their whole game cartridge problem that they're having, I'm still excited. Gaming is an expensive hobby. It always has been, and it always is. I have spent thousands on consoles, my computer, games, gaming memorabilia, gaming peripherals, just so I can keep playing it. Gaming has never been cheap. it has always been very, very expensive and a very luxurious hobby to have. And that's what it is. Gaming is a luxury. The luxury item is something that you can't always buy. It's something that you have to save for, something that you have to put money aside for. And that's what I've been doing for a few years now, is making sure I have enough money to buy the big purchases I want. I've been saving for the Switch 2 for about the past year to ensure I had enough money for it. And yes, I do. I have enough money for the Switch 2 and a couple of the games I want. But I'm not like most people. I'm in a very lucky position where I can save a lot of money. But to me, even the higher price of a lot of these games, of the Switch 2 itself, it still will be worth it to me. The Switch 2 only gives me half the amount of joy the first Switch gave me. It would still be worth it. And I don't think it will give me half. I'm assuming it will give me more. I don't like Nintendo as a company. I don't. I haven't for a long time now. But they are far from the worst company in the gaming industry. Far from it. There are about 6 other companies I can name off the top of my head who I despise. I don't like. I try to not support them as much as possible unless there is a game I genuinely want to see more of from them. But while Nintendo is greedy, they make good games consistently, which I know people will state that and say it's a bad argument, but what are you supporting in gaming? Do you want games that are shit, or do you want good games? Personally, I would rather support a more expensive game that is significantly better than a free-to-play game that is boring and just cheap to play, because I want better experiences. And under Nintendo, they have some of my personal favorite developers that I do want to support. I want to support whatever Intelligent Systems comes up with next for Fire Emblem. I want to support whatever Monolith Soft release next. I want to support whatever the Zelda team release next, and so on and so forth for all of their developers. They have some of the most talented developers and passionate developers at that. The gaming industry is influenced by player choice. The only way changes will happen is if you make a choice, and if the Switch 2 has miffed you so much that you don't want to support it, don't support Nintendo anymore. But a lot of people will say, my one action won't make a change. Well, you have to hope enough people make said action. Yes, certain franchises will never change. There is too many people who will play it every year when it comes out, so we'll never be able to change it. But you can still not support it. You can still not give them that sale. People believe that they don't care about you as a player, that they don't care about that single sale, but they do. Each sale matters to these big companies, and losing even a single sale is seen as a bad thing. So make it known. Don't just fold. Actually stand on what you want and what you believe in the industry. That's what I've been doing for the past 5 years now. I only support games that I genuinely like, and I will never buy a game that I think is bad or I think is anti-consumer, because I want to stand on what I believe. And yes, I know that one sale from me won't make a difference, but I hope enough people have the same beliefs as me for pro-consumer practices and believing in what we should get as consumers at a bare minimum to make a difference. And I think there has been, and it has been seen in the past. Just look at as all the games from the past 5-6 years who have had to completely change their tune because of how players reacted to it. My favorite, Battlefront 2 from EA. The game completely changed for the better because of how everyone made it apparent they didn't like what the game was. But despite this, the Switch 2 will still be a success. I expect Nintendo will see a slight dip in expected sales from launch and years following, and they might make a difference there like they did for the 3DS or the Wii U to try and increase sales, but the Switch 2 will be a slam dunk hit. It will be. There is no way it won't be. It is the most anticipated console follow-up in years. More than the PS5, more than everything. The Switch is one of the most successful consoles. The amount of hype behind it is understated. And people are saying that of course it's a success. It sold out instantly. What console hasn't sold out? The fucking Xbox Series X sold out at launch. All consoles sell out now at launch. It just happens because of scalping and all the other things. But it's what happens the year after, and the year after, and the year after. Will you be able to just walk in and get a console on shelves 6 months after launch? If you can, that will say a lot about what the state of the Switch is in. I honestly do think the Switch 2 is less desirable than the first Switch. It is. It is not as special because it is not the first Switch. The features it is offering is more for hardcore gamers and not as much casuals. The games at launch aren't as appealing to most people. Mario Kart, while extremely popular, I don't think is a system seller, like Zelda was. So I do expect the Switch 2 to sell a little bit worse. But again, that's just my opinion and what I think is going to happen. As I stated at the very beginning of this video, a first impression makes a lasting impression. And the Switch 2, well, it did an okay first impression, but it did the equivalent of a random stranger coming up to you at a pub, buying you a pint, and then making a mum joke towards you about your own mother. Yeah, it's good, it bought you a pint, but the joke just didn't sit right with you. So it put you off slightly to that person. It stumbled. And I think depending on how Nintendo responds to the stumble will determine how they do in the coming years. But hey, there are games I want to play on it. I want to play Xenoblade 4. I want to play the next Zelda. I want to play the next Fire Emblem. These are games I want to play, so I'm buying a Switch at launch. But to now put a fun little bow on this video, the Switch was genuinely a piece of hardware which facilitated me to play so many games which would go on to change me as a person, and I will forever be grateful to all the creatives that made those games and what they gave me. So let's just hope that the next 10 years are filled with games that are just impactful as the last 10 years. Thank you for changing my life. Hello lads and lasses, thanks for watching. This video was a bit different of course, but I wanted to make sure I made this before the Switch 2 actually came out, so I kind of pulled it ahead or made it as fast as possible in how I wanted it to, and I think it came out pretty well. But anyway, if you enjoyed it, let me know. I will make more videos akin to this in the future for other games or other consoles, so let me know. But first of all, thank you to all channel members, of course, Marty Morris and Chelsea and Tyler. Support is greatly appreciated, and thank everyone who saw the recent video for Look Outside. Very nice to see how much people enjoyed that video and certain aspects of it, so I'll definitely make sure that I try to incorporate some of them aspects more in future videos, more specifically me doing my funny voices. But yeah, thank you everyone genuinely for the support, it means a lot. But that's enough waffling from me. See you around. Crocodile.